Welcome back to another story on DC Harry. This time, we're bringing you, what if Zatanna sensed Harry's magic at age 4 and backward spells combined with his power rewrote fate itself. Your likes fuel our creativity. Subscribe and stay tuned. Here's the story. Chapter 1, The night London cracked. The rain had been falling on Little Whinging for 3 days straight. It wasn't the dramatic, story-appropriate kind of rain, no thunder, no lightning, just the grey, miserable English drizzle that seemed to seep through walls and settle into bones. Number 4, Privet Drive looked exactly like every other house on the street. Same neat hedges. Same clean driveway. Same net curtains in the windows, twitching whenever something interesting happened outside, which in Little Whinging was almost never. Inside, the house smelled like roast beef and furniture polish and something else underneath both of those, something that visitors never quite noticed consciously but that made them feel, inexplicably, like they should leave soon. 4-year-old Harry Potter was in the cupboard under the stairs. He'd been in there since yesterday morning, when he'd accidentally made Dudley's birthday cake float off the table and spin slowly in midair while everyone watched. He hadn't meant to do it. He never meant to do any of the things that happened around him, the time Aunt Petunia's prize roses all turned blue overnight, or the time he'd ended up on the school roof when a group of older boys were chasing him, or the time all of Vernon's ties unknotted themselves simultaneously during an important business dinner. He didn't understand why these things happened. He just knew they were his fault, and that when they were his fault, the cupboard was where he went. The cupboard was small. There was a fold-out cot wedged between the water pipes and the wall, a single blanket that was more holes than wool, and a cardboard box with a few broken toys that Dudley had already destroyed and no longer wanted. Harry had a torch with dying batteries that he used to read the backs of cereal boxes he'd smuggled in, because there was nothing else to read, and he'd already memorized all of those. He was hungry. He'd been hungry since yesterday. Above him, he could hear the television going, some program Dudley liked, with lots of shouting and cartoon sound effects. He could hear Uncle Vernon's laugh, which sounded like a walrus having an argument. He could hear Aunt Petunia moving in the kitchen, the clink and scrape of dishes being washed. No one was going to bring him anything to eat. Harry pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders and pressed himself into the corner of the cot, trying to make himself smaller. He was already very good at being small. At being invisible. At taking up as little space as possible so that the air around him didn't disturb anything, so that he didn't make things happen that he didn't mean to make happen. But tonight, something felt different. There was a pressure building in his chest that he didn't have a word for. He was 4, his vocabulary for internal states was limited, but it felt like the sensation just before you cried, except bigger. Like that feeling had swallowed the whole of him. It sat behind his ribs and pushed outward, and the more he tried to make himself small, the harder it pushed back. He thought about the birthday cake. He thought about the roses. He thought about the roof, and how for just 1 second before the panic set in, being up there had felt like something. Like breathing. He thought about the way Aunt Petunia looked at him sometimes when she thought he wasn't watching. Not with the tight-lipped anger she usually wore around him, but with something that flickered and was gone before he could identify it. Something that looked almost like fear. He didn't know why she would be afraid of him. He was 4. He was small. He couldn't even reach the kitchen counters. The pressure in his chest surged. The torch batteries, which had been dying, suddenly blazed so bright the bulb shattered. Harry flinched in the sudden darkness, and that was when it happened, not gradually, not with any warning, but all at once, like a dam breaking. The magic came out of him in a wave that had no color and no sound but that every spider in the house fled from simultaneously, that made the lights flicker on every floor, that cracked the plaster above the cupboard door in a pattern that would later, when someone thought to look, resemble a bolt of lightning. The cot shook. The cardboard box rattled. Every toy inside it hovered an inch off the ground. And somewhere in Harry's chest, the pressure released. He sat in the dark, breathing hard, trembling all over, with no idea what had just happened, only that something had, and it was the biggest something yet, and tomorrow was going to be very bad. He pulled his knees to his chest and put his forehead on them. He didn't cry. He'd learned that crying didn't help. The Mayfair Theatre was sold out. It was sold out every night Zatanna Zatara performed, had been for the past 3 weeks, and the queue for tickets to next month's run had already wrapped twice around the block. The marquee outside glowed gold in the wet London night. Zatanna, one night only, again, and the crowd inside the 1,400-seat venue was the particular kind of excited that built like static electricity in a room full of people who genuinely had no idea what they were about to see. They thought it was stage magic. That was fine. Let them think that. Zatanna was backstage, sitting at her dressing table in the fishnet stockings and the tailored tuxedo jacket and the top hat that had become as much a part of her identity as her own face, retouching her lipstick with the practiced ease of someone who'd been performing since she could walk. The mirror was surrounded by bulbs. Her reflection looked back at her with dark eyes that had seen considerably more than anyone sitting in those seats tonight. She looked 28. She was considerably more complicated than 28. 5 minutes, called the stage manager through the door. I know, she said, not loudly, but he heard it anyway. She set down the lipstick. Tilted the hat half an inch. Studied herself for a moment, not vanity, just the performer's final check, the moment before you stepped from the person into the character, except in her case the character and the person were substantially the same. She stood. Smoothed the jacket. Cracked her knuckles in a way that would have horrified her father. That was the thought that did it, as it always did, Giovanni, and the thing she kept sealed behind the part of herself she designated work shifted, just for a moment, before she pressed it back down. Her father had been gone for 2 years now. She was still, in the specific way that grief has of being both present and manageable at once, figuring out what that meant. She walked to the stage. She was 3 songs into the set. She always opened with the music, because the music was where the audience relaxed and stopped watching for tricks, when it hit her. It hit her like a fist between the shoulder blades. Like a frequency suddenly audible when everything else went silent. She was mid-note, her hands in the middle of a gesture that would, to the audience, appear to summon a cascade of doves from nowhere, and she felt it so clearly that she missed a beat for the first time in 11 years of professional performance. The audience didn't notice. The doves appeared on schedule. The music kept going. But Zatanna stood very still for 2 seconds, her performer's face doing its job on autopilot while the rest of her attention snapped outward like a compass needle finding north. Raw magic. Real magic. Not a spell, not a working, not any kind of intentional casting. This was unstructured, wild, the kind of power that came from a living being rather than a practiced mind. And the volume of it was wrong. It was wrong in the way that a sound was wrong when it came from a direction where nothing should be able to make a sound. Too much. Too dense. Like someone had taken the magical output of a grown and trained adult practitioner and compressed it into something the size of a child. She played the rest of the show on muscle memory. The audience got everything they'd paid for, the illusions, the real workings she dressed up as illusions, the finale where she appeared to stop time for everyone in the room for 15 seconds, which she didn't dress up at all, just did it, because she liked the way they looked when they came back into themselves. Confused and wondering. Like they'd briefly touched something they couldn't name. Tonight she barely noticed. She was locating the source. Southwest. Surrey, by the feel of it. A residential area, unremarkable, the magical signature was quiet now, the initial surge gone, but there was a thread of it left, the kind of residue that magic left in the air the way perfume clung to fabric. She pulled at it gently, mapping it, and what she found made her go still in a way that had nothing to do with her stage composure. There was a child at the end of that thread. A young child. Alone. In a small space. She walked off stage to applause she didn't hear, stripped off the hat, and said to her stage manager, "Cancel the after-party. And get my coat." She drove herself to Surrey because it was faster, and because the kind of things she did in a car at speed when she was in a hurry didn't need witnesses. The M25 was nearly empty at midnight. The rain was still going. The address she'd resolved the magical signature to was a perfectly ordinary house on a perfectly ordinary street, and the ordinariness of it set her teeth on edge in a specific way she'd learned to trust. Too neat. Too careful. The kind of house that worked very hard at looking normal. She stood on the pavement outside for a moment, hat in hand, rain hitting her shoulders. The residue of the magic was coming from inside. Ground floor. A very small space. Under the stairs, she realized. She was at the front door before she'd consciously decided to move. She knocked. It took nearly 2 minutes. Then a light went on upstairs, then the landing light, then footsteps coming down, heavy, deliberate footsteps that she immediately and correctly assessed belonged to a large, irritated man who resented being woken up. The door opened on a chain. A slice of Vernon Dursley's face appeared in the gap, small eyes, large mustache, the particular expression of a man who had decided preemptively to be hostile. "It's midnight," he said. "It is," Zatanna agreed pleasantly. "Whatever you're selling, I'm not selling anything. I'm here about the child you have in the cupboard under your stairs." She said it the same way she'd say I'm here about the noise complaint, conversational and matter-of-fact, and watched Vernon Dursley's face go through 4 expressions in under a second. The chain came off. The door opened fully. He was very large. He was wearing a striped dressing gown and his face was going through a complicated journey from irritated to something approaching alarmed. Behind him, halfway down the stairs, was a thin blonde woman with a neck that seemed slightly too long, clutching her dressing gown closed and staring at Zatanna with eyes that had gone very wide. "I don't know what you think you know," Vernon started. "There's a child in the cupboard," Zatanna said. "He's alone. I'd like to see him." "He's sleeping," Petunia said from the stairs. Her voice was sharp but there was something underneath it. "He's perfectly fine, he hasn't eaten since yesterday morning." Silence. Zatanna felt the magic still residually trembling in the air around this house. Not just Harry's outburst but something older, layered into the walls, the specific kind of magical signature that came from containment. From suppression. She felt it the way she felt cold, directly and physically. "Who are you?" Vernon demanded, his voice having arrived at blustering. "Someone who's going to see that child," Zatanna said, "one way or another. The way this goes is entirely up to you." Something in her voice, not a working, not a spell, just the specific quality that her voice had always carried, her father's gift to her along with everything else, made Vernon Dursley take 1 step back. She walked into the house. The cupboard under the stairs had a latch on the outside. She noted that without expression, lifted it, and opened the door. The small space inside smelled like dust and old wool and something she identified after a moment as the particular scent of magic that had been compressed too long. A child's magic. Like static and lightning in green things growing in the rain. Harry Potter was curled in the corner of a narrow cot, his knees pulled up, his face hidden. He was wearing clothes that were 3 sizes too big and had clearly been handed down from a larger child. In the sweep of her torch, she'd taken it from her coat pocket, she could see the broken torch on the cot beside him, the smashed bulb, the scattered toys hovering a half-inch off the ground as though they'd frozen mid-flight when he'd finally exhausted himself. He looked up when the light hit him. She'd expected fear. She'd expected the cringing, the flinching, the automatic defensive curling that children did when they'd been hurt often enough. She was braced for it. She had a whole approach in mind for how to speak to a frightened 4-year-old. Harry Potter looked at her with green eyes that were enormous behind glasses held together with tape, and what she saw in them wasn't fear. It was assessment. He was looking at her the way she looked at a new audience, taking inventory, reading the room, trying to figure out what was about to happen and whether he had any influence over it. 4 years old. In a cupboard. Having just sent out a magical pulse that had reached her through 14 miles and a sold-out theater. And he was trying to figure out if she was a threat. "Hello," she said, and sat down on her heels so she was level with him. My name's Zatanna. What's yours? He considered her for a moment. Then, with the specific gravity of a small person deciding this information was worth parting with, he said, Harry. Harry, she repeated. I felt your magic from a long way away, Harry. I came to see if you were all right. His brow furrowed. My magic? The things you can do. The floating, and the lights, and the way you ended up on the roof that one time. She watched his eyes widen incrementally. Yes, I know about that. That's what magic feels like when it's coming from someone very powerful. It makes a noise, if you know how to listen. Uncle Vernon says I'm not supposed to. Uncle Vernon, Zatanna said carefully, is wrong about quite a lot of things. Is he your family? Harry glanced past her toward the Dursleys, who were standing in the hallway looking at her with the expressions of people watching something they couldn't stop. He looked back at her. They don't like me very much, he said. It was such a measured, matter-of-fact sentence. Not self-pity. Just observation. The statement of a child who had assessed his situation accurately and reported it without drama because drama had never helped. Something behind Zatanna's sternum did something complicated. Have you eaten today? She asked. He shook his head. She stood up and turned to look at the Dursleys for a long moment. Vernon had his arms crossed. Petunia had the look of a woman who was trying very hard to be composed and not quite making it. Pack his things, Zatanna said. Now see here, Vernon started. Pack his things, she said again, and this time she did let a little of the working into it, nothing coercive, just the weight of genuine intention, or I will pack them for you, and then we'll have a much longer conversation about the latch on the outside of that door. Petunia went up the stairs without looking at her husband. Vernon Dursley stood very still in the hallway of his very normal house, looking at the woman in the white shirt and the black jacket standing in the pool of torchlight from his cupboard, and had the look of a man confronting something that his entire worldview had no space for. You can't just take him, he said, but it came out smaller than he'd intended. I can and I will, she said simply. And honestly, Mr. Dursley, I think part of you knows that's not the worst outcome here. He didn't answer. She turned back to Harry. He was still sitting on the cot, watching her with those enormous eyes, but there was something different in his expression now. Something that hadn't been there before. Are you taking me somewhere? He asked. Yes, she said. Where? My home. It's in London. It's warmer than this. She glanced at the single inadequate blanket. Significantly warmer. Will you bring me back? He asked, and here it was, the first genuine flicker of something other than careful assessment. The question came out with a precision that told her it was something he'd thought about before. Not will I be safe, not who are you, but will you bring me back? As though the worst outcome he could imagine was a temporary reprieve. Not to this, she said. He looked at her for 3 full seconds. Then he nodded, the single decisive nod of a child who has made an evaluation and reached a conclusion, and stood up off the cot. Petunia came back downstairs with a carrier bag. Inside it was one change of clothes, a broken toy car, and a photograph, the only photograph, Zatanna would later discover, that existed in this house of Harry at all, a small square snapshot of a laughing baby being held by a young woman with green eyes and wild dark hair. Zatanna took the bag. She looked at the photograph for a moment. She looked at Petunia. Something moved in Petunia Dursley's face, something that was almost grief, almost guilt, and something else that Zatanna recognized with a kind of tired sadness as relief. Pure, unambiguous relief. His parents, Petunia said, and nodded at the photograph. My sister. She died. 3 years ago. I know, Zatanna said quietly. I know who he is. Petunia looked at her sharply. Then you know there are, people. People who will come looking for him. I expect they will. And you're not one of them. Zatanna looked at the woman in the hallway, in her dressing gown, at 1 in the morning, the relief still plainly visible on her face despite her best efforts to suppress it. She thought about the latch on the cupboard door. She thought about the carrier bag with one change of clothes. She thought about asking a great many things. She chose not to. Some answers would only make her want to do things she'd regret. Not exactly, she said. She took Harry's hand, he let her, no flinching, just that same careful assessment, and walked out of number 4, Privet Drive into the rain. She'd parked half a street away. Harry walked beside her without complaint, his 2 big shoes splashing in the puddles, head tipped back to feel the rain on his face with an expression that looked, inexplicably, like relief. She opened the passenger door for him, helped him in, went around to the driver's side. For a moment she just sat with her hands on the wheel, the rain on the windscreen, the quiet of the car around them. "Are you hungry?" she asked. "Yes," Harry said, without the particular note of apology that children who are always hungry learn to add to that answer. "There's a services on the motorway. We'll stop." She started the car. "Do you like chips?" He looked at her sideways. "Everyone likes chips." "Fair point." She pulled out onto the street. In the rearview mirror, the lights of number 4, Privet Drive receded into the rain. Harry watched them go and then turned forward and didn't look back, and there was something in that, in the complete, deliberate forward-facing quality of a 4-year-old leaving the only home he'd ever known, that Zatanna filed away in the part of herself that would need to think about this later. "Zatanna's a funny name," Harry said, after about 2 minutes of motorway. "It is," she agreed. "What does it mean?" "It's a magician's name. My father gave it to me." She glanced at him. "Do you know what a magician is?" "Like on telly. With the cards and the scarves." "That's part of it." He thought about this. Outside, the motorway lights were washing past in orange streaks and the rain was letting up slightly, just enough that the windscreen wipers went from frantic to steady. Harry had both hands in his lap, sitting very straight, the way small children sat in cars when they were trying to seem grown up. "The floating," he said. Is that magic?" "Yes." "Are you magic?" "Yes." "Am I?" She looked at him. "Very," she said. "Extremely. Remarkably. The most I've felt from someone your age in a very long time." He absorbed this. Turned it over. She could actually watch the processing happen in his expression, the careful weighing of information against known data. "Uncle Vernon said it was, he called it," he stopped. She waited. "He said I was abnormal." "Well," Zatanna said, "he's not entirely wrong. But abnormal and bad aren't the same thing. I'm abnormal. Your parents were abnormal. Abnormal just means different from the ordinary, and ordinary is," she tilted her hand, a so gesture, frankly a bit dull. Harry looked at her hand. Then, very small and very carefully, like someone testing whether a thing was real, he smiled. It was, she thought, the most cautious smile she had ever seen on a human face. But it was there. They stopped at the services and she got chips for him and coffee for herself and they sat in a fluorescent-lit booth at 1 in the morning while Harry ate with the concentrated focus of a child who understood that food might have an end and should be taken seriously, and she watched him and thought about what she was doing. She knew who Harry Potter was. The magical world, her magical world, the one that existed in the gaps between the DC universe's extraordinary architecture, overlapped with the British wizarding community in specific and complicated ways. John Constantine had explained most of it to her, in the way Constantine explained things, which was to say reluctantly and with maximum profanity and at least one cigarette per major plot point. She knew about Voldemort. She knew about the prophecy. She knew about the night 3 years ago that had sent reverberations through every magical community on the planet, the night a Dark Lord died on the power of his own killing curse rebounding from an infant. She knew what Harry Potter was supposed to be. The boy who lived. The chosen one. The sacrificial instrument of a destiny that had been set in motion before he was born. She looked at him across the table. He had a bit of ketchup on his chin. He was eating chips with complete seriousness. She thought about the cupboard. The latch on the outside. The carrier bag with one change of clothes. She thought about the magical pulse that had hit her like a physical blow from 14 miles away, from a 4-year-old alone in the dark, the kind of power that should have been impossible, the kind that happened when something vast was compressed into something small for too long and finally, inevitably, found a way out. She thought about Giovanni. About her father's voice saying magic is a responsibility, Zatanna. It answers to character. She thought about the things that were coming for this child. The people who would use him. The destiny that had been written without his consent. The war that wanted to put him at the center of its story. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "Harry," she said. He looked up, chip halfway to his mouth. "How would you like to come and live with me?" The chip paused in midair. He looked at her with those extraordinary eyes, green as new leaves, ancient seeming in a way that had nothing to do with experience and everything to do with what he was, the kind of depth that made people who didn't know better feel like they were being evaluated by someone considerably older than the face suggested. "You don't know me," he said. "I know your magic," she said. "It woke me up from across London. I know that whatever you are, it's something I've never encountered before. And I know," she looked at him steadily, "that you've been alone in a very small space for a very long time, and you deserve better than that." He put the chip down. "What would I have to do?" he asked. And there it was again, that precise, careful practicality. "Not really." Or "yes please," or the overwhelmed tears of a child who'd been starved of kindness. "What would I have to do?" As though kindness must have a price, as though every offered hand came with conditions attached. "Nothing," she said. "You don't have to do anything. You just live there. Go to school. Eat regular meals." "Regular," he repeated, like the word was new. "Every day," she confirmed. He was quiet for a long moment. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Outside, a lorry went past on the wet road, its lights sweeping across the windows. "Okay," Harry said. He picked up the chip and ate it. She looked out the window at the motorway lights and the rain, and felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years, since her father disappeared, since the terrible work of finding him and losing him properly and learning to live in the shape of that loss. She felt like something had been placed in her hands that was precious and hers and her responsibility to protect. She was not, by nature, a woman who was frightened of very much. For the first time in a long time, she was at least a little bit scared. It felt right. It felt correct. It felt, she thought, like the particular kind of scared that meant you were about to do something that mattered. The townhouse in Marylebone was 4 floors of slightly chaotic brilliance, bookshelves on every wall, magical artifacts displayed alongside vintage show posters, a kitchen that was always somehow both stocked and mysterious, a garden in the back that grew things that weren't in any botanical catalogue. She made up the guest room while Harry stood in the doorway and looked at the bookshelves in the hallway with an expression she'd learned to recognize over the next several years as his "I want to read all of those" face. "Can I?" he asked, pointing. "Any of them with a green spine are fine," she said. "The ones with red spines you should ask me about first. The ones with silver spines you can look at but not open yet." He nodded, treating this as completely reasonable information. She found him pajamas. She'd have to buy things in the morning. He had almost nothing, and they were too big but less dramatically so than what he'd been wearing. She made him brush his teeth. She showed him the light switch. She showed him that the window opened and how the latch worked and what the view of the garden looked like from here, the light from the kitchen window making the rain-wet leaves shine. He stood at the window and looked at the garden for a while. "It's nice," he said. "It is," she agreed. She was at the door when he said, "Zatanna." "Yeah. Are there more people like you? Who can do magic, I mean? More than just you and me?" She leaned against the doorframe. "Yes. Quite a lot, actually. Two different kinds, more or less. There's my kind, where magic is a craft, a skill, a language. And then there's the kind you come from, which is, more built-in. More biological. Your parents were from that world. He turned from the window to look at her. My parents did magic. Your mother was brilliant at it, she said. And from what I understand, your father was talented and absolutely insufferable about it. He considered this. Something moved in his face that was complicated and young and very quiet. Do you think, he said, very carefully, that it's why they died? The magic? She could have lied to him. He was 4, and she could have softened it, deferred it, said we'll talk about it when you're older, the way adults said when they didn't want to have the conversation. Yes, she said. But not because of anything they did wrong. Because something very bad came after them, and they fought it, and they protected you. She met his eyes. You're here because of what they did. That means something. He turned that over for a long time. Okay, he said, finally. Good night, Zatanna. Good night, Harry. She pulled the door most of the way closed and stood in the hallway for a moment with her hand on the wood, listening to the specific quiet of a sleeping house with one more person in it than it had had this morning. Then she went downstairs and poured herself a proper drink and sat at the kitchen table and thought about what she'd just done. About 20 minutes later, the front doorbell rang. She opened it to find Albus Dumbledore standing on her doorstep. He was dressed in deep blue robes that would have looked extraordinary at any time of day and merely eccentric at 2 in the morning, his half-moon spectacles perched on his crooked nose, his long silver beard catching the light. He was carrying a wand loosely at his side and wearing the expression of a man who had arrived with a prepared speech. He looked at Zatanna. At her townhouse. At the complete absence of the boy he'd come for. Miss Zatara, he said. His voice was warm and measured and entirely failing to conceal the complex set of calculations happening behind his eyes. Professor Dumbledore, she said. I'd offer you tea, but it's 2 in the morning. I'm aware, he said. I believe you have something, someone, that belongs. He doesn't belong to you, she said, pleasantly. Dumbledore paused. Harry Potter is safe, she said. Federal warm. Asleep in a room that has a door with a handle on the inside. She watched something shift in his expression, just briefly, just enough to tell her that he knew about the cupboard, had known, and had made a calculation about it. He's fine, Dumbledore. More than he was. He needs to be among people of his own kind, he needs to be somewhere that isn't a cupboard, she said. We can have the philosophical discussion about what kind of magic child goes where some other time. The blood protections are not a substitute for care, she said. And besides, I'm not entirely sure they were working as well as you hoped. What I felt from that house tonight was not a protected child, it was a suppressed one. And suppressed power doesn't disappear. It accumulates. Dumbledore looked at her for a long moment over his spectacles. The calculating warmth of him was doing its work, she could feel it, the specific magical quality of him, the weight and presence of someone genuinely formidable. She gave it its due and stood her ground. You intend to keep him, he said. I intend to raise him, she said. Yes. He has a destiny, he has a life, she said. The destiny can wait. He's 4. Another long silence. Rain. A car going past somewhere on the next street. This is not, Dumbledore said quietly, how things were supposed to go. No, she agreed. I imagine it isn't. She tilted her head. But I'll tell you something, Professor, the version of events you had planned involved keeping a remarkably powerful child deliberately undersupported in a household that resented him, on the theory that hardship would make him appropriately humble and loyal and, most importantly, ready to sacrifice himself when you needed him to. The silence that followed that was very different from the ones before it. That is a rather cynical characterization, Dumbledore said. It's an accurate one, she said. I've met enough men who confuse their plans with the right thing to recognize the shape of it. She watched something move in his face, not anger, which would have been easier. Something more complicated. Something that was possibly, in its way, the genuine article. He will still need to face Voldemort, Dumbledore said. Whatever you do with him in the meantime, that reality does not change. I know, she said. And when that time comes, he'll be ready. Better ready than you'd have made him. She put her hand on the door. Good night, Professor. I'll be in touch about enrollment when he's 11. She closed the door. She stood in the hallway for a moment in the quiet of the house. From upstairs, very faint, she might have imagined it but she didn't think she did, she heard the soft thump of a small person getting settled in a bed. The creak of springs taking a child's weight. The particular silence that followed, the one that meant sleep coming on, the body finally willing to let the day go. She looked up at the ceiling. She thought about destiny and plans and the shape of things supposed to go. Then she went back to the kitchen, finished her drink, and started making a list of everything she needed to buy tomorrow. Clothes. Books. A proper torch. Those small glasses were going to need to be replaced with something that didn't fall off his nose. She looked at the list. Added, breakfast things. Added, whatever 4-year-olds eat for breakfast. Figure this out. She looked at that last line for a moment, and despite everything, the Dumbledore visit, the weight of what she'd just taken on, the full scope of what was coming for the child sleeping upstairs, she laughed. Quietly, to herself, in the kitchen at 2 in the morning. It was the kind of laugh that was also a yes. A commitment. A door closing on one thing and opening on another. She put the list on the fridge under a magnet shaped like a rabbit that had appeared there 3 years ago and never explained itself. She turned out the kitchen light. She went upstairs to bed. Outside, the rain finally, after 3 days, began to stop. Chapter 2, The Art of Speaking Backwards. The first time Harry tried a backward spell, he set the kitchen on fire. Not dramatically, it wasn't a roaring inferno, nothing was destroyed, no one was hurt, it was a small, precise, deeply impressive fire that appeared directly in the center of the kitchen table and burned with a blue-white intensity that had no business coming from the mouth of a 5-year-old saying, "Arif no," for the first time. Zatanna put it out in under a second. Then she stood there looking at the scorched circle on her kitchen table and the small boy standing on the other side of it, his hands at his sides, his expression split evenly between alarmed and absolutely delighted. "Well," she said. "I did it," Harry said. "You did," she confirmed. "You also destroyed my table. You said Arif no meant fire on. I said it meant, ignite something. I expected a candle. Possibly a match." She looked at the scorch mark. "Not whatever that was." Harry looked at the table. Then back at her. He was wearing a blue jumper that actually fit him. She'd spent 3 weeks getting his wardrobe sorted, had discovered in the process that shopping for small children involved considerably more negotiation than she'd anticipated, mostly because Harry had opinions about everything and expressed them with the calm certainty of someone twice his height, and his new glasses, which were round and fit his face properly and made his green eyes look even more startlingly vivid. "Am I in trouble?" he asked. "No. But we're going to talk about scaling." He climbed back onto his stool and put his elbows on the undamaged part of the table. This was his listening position, elbows on table, chin on hands, the focused attention of a child who actually wanted to know things. She'd learned in the first month that Harry's appetite for information was essentially bottomless and that explaining things to him was different from explaining things to other children because he retained everything, questioned everything, and connected dots between pieces of information in ways that occasionally startled her. "Scaling," he repeated. "Backward speech isn't just a vocabulary," she said, pulling out the chair across from him and sitting down. "It's a relationship between intention and language. The words focus the magic, but what amplifies it is you, your intent, your energy, your power. Most practitioners, the word does most of the work. With you, She gestured at the scorch mark. You're doing most of the work, and the word is just pointing it. So I said fire on, but my magic hurt a lot of fire, but on this specific spot. She stared at him. I'm 5, he said, preempting whatever expression she was making. Not a baby. I'm aware, she said. And yes. Yes. Exactly right. She tapped the table. Which means you need to learn to modulate your output before you practice any more ignition words. How? By starting smaller. She reached across the table and placed a single white birthday candle between them. She kept a supply of them for exactly this kind of session. You're going to light this candle. Just the candle. You're going to put the word in your mouth and feel the power behind it and consciously decide how much of yourself you're pushing through it. Harry looked at the candle with great seriousness. What if I blow up the candle? Candles are replaceable. Keep going. He looked at it for a long moment. His expression shifted into something she'd started recognizing as his working face, the particular internal quiet that happened when Harry was not thinking about what he was doing but actually doing it, the concentration going inward rather than outward. His magic was visible to her even without any casting happening, a shimmer in the air around him that no instrument would have caught but that she felt the way she felt weather. Irifno, he said, softly. The candle lit. A single, perfectly ordinary flame. No blue-white intensity. No scorching. Just a small yellow fire sitting at the top of a birthday candle in the middle of a kitchen table with a scorched patch on it. She looked at the candle. Then at Harry. He was smiling. Not the small, careful smile from that first night at the motorway services. This one was wider, less guarded, the smile of a child who had done a thing on purpose and it had come out right. Again, she said. But this time, put it out first. What's the word for, figure it out? He looked at her. The smile shifted into something more thoughtful, and he turned to look at the candle with his head slightly tilted, the way he looked at puzzles. Fire, he murmured, mostly to himself. Fire out. Arif Tuo. The flame went out. She said nothing, just gestured at the candle. He lit it again. Put it out. Lit it. Put it out. By the 5th repetition, his posture had changed, he was sitting up straighter, his hands no longer on the table but in his lap, and the shimmer in the air around him had steadied from the erratic energy of a child's magic to something more deliberate, more shaped. She watched him practice and thought, not for the first time, that there was something structural about his power that she'd never encountered before. Most magical practitioners, even exceptional ones, even those born to it, had a kind of ceiling, a maximum output that could be trained higher but that had a shape to it. Harry had no ceiling she could identify. His power didn't have a top end. It had, instead, a depth, like looking down into water and not being able to see the bottom, not because it wasn't there but because the light didn't reach it. What it also had was perfect internal consistency. When he cast, there was no waste, no scatter. Even at 5 years old, even doing the equivalent of magical finger painting, his power went where he aimed it and nowhere else. She had no idea what to do with that except train it as carefully as she could and try not to think too hard about what it was going to look like in 10 years. Zatanna, Harry said, without stopping his candle exercise. When can I learn the big ones? What counts as big? The ones in Dad's journals. She went still. She'd given him Giovanni's journals 3 weeks after he came to live with her, when she'd caught him on a stool trying to reach the red-spined books on the 4th shelf. She'd redirected him to the journals instead, a calculated decision, because Giovanni's working journals were a masterclass in magical theory and practice, and because she thought the act of reading someone else's magic might help Harry understand his own. She'd also, if she was honest with herself, wanted to see what he made of them. He'd read all 4 volumes in 2 weeks. He kept one of them under his pillow. Which specific ones, she said carefully. The reality ones, he said. Where he talks about bending space. There's a chapter on spatial displacement and he says 3 practitioners working backward speech in concert could theoretically fold 2 points in space together, and I was thinking, is that like apparition? Because your world has apparition and mine, he'd started calling them your world and mine with a specific and functional clarity that she found both useful and occasionally heartbreaking. Mine has it too, but it's a different mechanism. What makes them different? She put her coffee cup down. She looked at the 5-year-old on the other side of the kitchen table who was lighting and extinguishing a birthday candle while explaining spatial displacement theory at her. First of all, she said, finish the candle exercise. He did 3 more repetitions, deliberately, and then looked up. Apparition in your world is a brute force fold, she said. You're pushing yourself through space by will. My father's spatial displacement work is different. You're asking space to rearrange itself around you. Polite versus forceful. Which is better? Depends what you need. Forceful is faster. Polite is more precise. Harry considered this. Can you do both? I can do the polite version. She paused. Your world does theirs better than mine. He absorbed this with a nod. So I should learn both. Eventually. When's eventually? When you can light a candle without scorching the table, she said. He looked at the undamaged portion of the table and then at the scorch mark, and she could see him making a note somewhere in his extraordinary memory. Filed. Prioritized. He would almost certainly practice candles for the rest of the evening. He did. The year he turned 6, John Constantine came to dinner and stayed for 4 months. He showed up on a Tuesday in November with a bottle of scotch, a haunted look, and the specific kind of bad energy that preceded his visits the way weather fronts preceded storms. Zatanna opened the door and looked at him and said, "How bad?" And he said, "Bad enough that I'd rather be here than anywhere else, which should tell you something," and she stepped back to let him in. He stopped when he reached the kitchen doorway. Harry was at the table doing his reading. He'd graduated from cereal box backs to actual books by now, Giovanni's journals on one side, an absurdly advanced primary school mathematics text on the other, and he looked up at Constantine with the same assessing gaze he turned on everything new. Constantine looked at the child. Then at Zatanna. Then back at the child. "You actually did it," he said. "I told you I did. I thought you were being, I don't know, metaphorical." He looked at Harry again. "Hello." "Hello," Harry said. "Are you the John Constantine she keeps threatening to call when I'm being difficult?" Constantine blinked. Looked at Zatanna. "He's been here 2 years and he already knows about me." "You come up in conversation," she said. "Mostly when she says things like, 'I know someone who can explain what happens when magic goes wrong,'" Harry said, returning to his book. "She uses you as a cautionary tale." "Does she?" Constantine said. "Extensively." Constantine turned to Zatanna with an expression she knew well, the one where he was doing something with his face to prevent another expression from showing. She gave him a don't, and he gave her a fine and went to pour himself a glass from the scotch he'd brought. He stayed for dinner. He stayed for the week. He stayed because, as he put it, he was lying low while some things sorted themselves out, and Marrowbone was comfortable and Zatanna's wards were better than his current flats, and besides, the kid's interesting, he told her on the 3rd night, when Harry was in bed and they were in the sitting room with drinks. "What exactly is he?" "Wizarding world," she said. "British. Born magical." "I know that much. I mean, what is he?" He swirled his glass. "Because I sat next to him at dinner and he asked me 3 questions about the Brujeria and I had to actually think about the answers, I had to think. He does that. He's 6. I'm aware." Constantine looked at her steadily over the rim of his glass. He had the kind of face that had been through enough to stop performing anything it didn't mean. The lines around his eyes weren't from laughing, the set of his jaw wasn't from comfort, but there was something real underneath it all that she'd always trusted, even when everything else about him was a layer of misdirection and cigarette smoke. "Is he safe?" Constantine asked. You know what I mean. Yes, she said. He's not going to go dark, if that's what you're asking. I'm asking if you've thought about what he's going to be. Every day. And? She was quiet for a moment. Outside, London did what London did at night, taxi engines, distant music, the specific urban hum that was always present but never quite the same twice. He's going to be remarkable, she said. And I'm going to make sure he gets there intact. Constantine nodded slowly. How's he with the backward speech? He asked. Past the foundational vocabulary. He's doing intermediate workings. At 6. At 6. And the wand work? We haven't started. She shook her head. I want the backward speech solid first. I want him to understand that magic is a relationship, that it responds to character. Then we'll add the wand. And when you combine them? She looked at him. He looked back. Yeah, he said quietly. That's what I thought. He stayed for 4 months. He spent most mornings at the kitchen table with Harry, who mined him for information about every dark and dangerous magical tradition he'd ever encountered, the way a prospector worked a promising seam, methodically, without drama, getting everything there was to get. Constantine, who found most people exhausting, found this oddly companionable. He answered the questions. He added warnings where appropriate. He noted, and reported back to Zatanna, that Harry's response to warnings was never fear but always a kind of algorithmic assessment, danger level, mitigation strategy, acceptable risk. He's going to do things that scare you, Constantine told her. He already does, she said. I mean on purpose. I know. And you're okay with that? She looked at him. I'm raising him to be powerful and responsible and unafraid. What he does with that is his. My job is to make sure he can handle the consequences. Constantine was quiet. Then, unexpectedly, Giovanni would have loved him. She turned to look at the window. Yeah, she said. He would have. The year Harry turned 8, he got his wand. Not from Ollivander, that would come later, when the wizarding world became relevant again, and she was in no hurry for that. This wand came from a woman named Esmeralda who ran a workshop in a basement in Notting Hill and who built wands for practitioners who existed in the gaps between magical communities. She was 73 years old and 3 feet wide and had eyes that were the color of old amber, and when Harry walked into her workshop she looked at him for a full minute without speaking. You're not what I expected, she said. People keep saying that, Harry said. Zatanna described you as a handful. She says that with affection, Harry said. Esmeralda looked at Zatanna, who shrugged. She looked back at Harry. Come here, then. What followed was 2 hours and 47 wands. Not because Harry was difficult, the wands weren't rejecting him, precisely, but because Esmeralda kept stopping and starting over, her expression shifting from professional to genuinely puzzled. The problem, she said, on the 23rd wand, is not finding a wand that works. It's that all of them work. There's no preference, no selection, no, she gestured frustratedly, every wand I hand you, it functions. Fully. Immediately. You're not supposed to do that. What does it mean? Harry asked. In theory. It means the wand as a tool is supplementary for you. You're not channeling through it. It's channeling through you. She put the 23rd wand down and looked at him. The wand's supposed to be the primary focus. For you it's more like a microphone. Does he still need one? Zatanna asked. From a wizarding world standpoint, yes. For practical magical purposes, Esmeralda picked up the first wand again, put it in Harry's hand, watched the immediate warm response of the wood with an expression she seemed to reserve for exceptional things. He'll be doing wandless magic as a natural default within 2 years. The wand will be a formality. Harry looked at the wand, holly, as it turned out, 10 inches, with a core that Esmeralda was reluctant to specify beyond, something I haven't used before, with an expression that was thoughtful and unimpressed in equal measure. "Can I practice with it now?" he asked. "Knock yourself out," Esmeralda said, and then immediately looked concerned about that phrasing. He turned to the far end of the workroom, raised the wand, and said ex nixeba, which was her father's word for become absent, a complex working that made the target temporarily undetectable to magical senses. The entire back wall of the workshop disappeared from magical perception. Esmeralda sat down very suddenly in her chair. "Right," she said. "Yes. I see." Harry looked at the wall, now visible to regular sight but magically invisible, a bizarre and disorienting effect, and then at Zatanna with mild curiosity. "Is it supposed to take that long to come back?" "You're supposed to reverse it," she said. "Oh." He reversed it. The wall returned. He looked satisfied. "I thought the wand was supposed to make it easier." "It's supposed to make it possible," Zatanna said. "For most people." "Hm." He turned the wand over in his hand, examining it the way he examined things that interested him. "I like it anyway. It's nice." He looked at Esmeralda. "Thank you." Esmeralda, who had made wands for 30 years, looked at this 8-year-old holding her work like he was deciding whether the craftsmanship met his standards, and said, "You are very welcome," with complete sincerity. The wand work, once it began properly, fused with the backward speech in ways that Zatanna tracked with a mixture of pride and something she'd never admit was awe. The mechanics were simple in theory and extraordinary in practice. Backward speech gave words an inverted reality relationship, a quality of undoing even when the content was constructive, a sideways approach to the nature of things rather than a direct one. Harry's wandless, wordless wizarding magic was different, deeply forward, direct, intent-driven, with the raw power of a tradition rooted in ancient blood. When the two combined, the result was a working that approached its target from two directions simultaneously, like light passing through a prism and becoming spectrum. She first saw them combine fully when Harry was 9. They were in the garden, doing a shielding exercise. She was casting at him at half strength, testing his defensive response time, when she threw an illusion working at him, a fairly complex one meant to overwhelm the senses. His wand came up, and she saw his lips move with a backwards word, and the working hit his shield and did something she'd never seen a defensive spell do. It didn't block the illusion. It answered it. The illusion she'd sent him, a cascade of false sensory input, meant to be disorienting, met his combined working and transformed. It turned into something else entirely, a working neither offensive nor defensive but something in between, a third thing, a translated thing, that expanded outward and wrapped around both of them and for a moment made the garden look like it existed in two places at once. Harry looked around at the doubled garden with an expression of pure scientific interest. "That wasn't right," he said. "What did you mean to do?" she asked, which was always her first question after anything unexpected. "Block it." He looked at his wand. "I said Eno Denimok, shield combined, but I think the power went through both systems and he frowned, working through it, they talked to each other." "Combined," she said. "Combined," he agreed. "It was," he tilted his head, looking for the word, "it was like when you harmonize. Two different notes that make a third thing." She stood in the doubled garden, which was fading now, both versions bleeding back into one, the magic dissipating naturally, and looked at her 9-year-old and thought, "Giovanni, if you could see this." "Can you do it again?" she asked. He raised the wand, thought for a moment, and said Enigmok, and she felt both systems activate simultaneously, felt them find each other in the air between his intention and his casting, felt the specific harmonic frequency of two distinct magical traditions resonating. The light in the garden shifted. Not dramatically, not in any way a neighbor would have noticed, but the quality of it changed. It came from slightly the wrong angle, touched leaves from a direction the sun wasn't, and the shadows under the rose bushes went two ways at once. He held it for 3 seconds. Then let it go. He looked at her with wide eyes. "What was that?" he said, quietly. "Something new," she said, honestly. He looked down at his wand. Then at his hands. Then up at her. "Teach me to control it," he said. "I'm going to need to figure out how first," she said. He nodded, accepting this. "Then, practically, should we make notes?" They went inside and made notes. John Constantine came back periodically over the years, sometimes for days, sometimes for months, always appearing at inconvenient moments with useful information and deeply inconvenient personal habits. He smoked on the back step. He drank Zatanna's scotch. He taught Harry things that Zatanna had specifically not taught him yet on the basis that she wanted to introduce them properly, and then defended himself from her irritation by pointing out that if she hadn't wanted it to happen she should have told Harry not to ask him things, which was, she had to admit, a fair point. When Harry was 9, Constantine sat with him in the garden on a November afternoon and told him about the Wizarding War. Not the children's version, not the story of the brave baby who defeated the Dark Lord and saved everybody. The actual version. Voldemort, and what he was, and what he'd done, and why it mattered. The prophecy. The Potters. What Harry Potter was supposed to be to the people who were waiting for him. Harry listened without interrupting, which was how he always listened when something was important. When Constantine finished, Harry was quiet for a moment. "Do you think he's gone?" he asked. "Voldemort?" "No," Constantine said. "Neither do I." Harry looked at the rose bushes, winter bare, their thorns sharp in the grey light. "He's been quiet for 9 years but it's not the same as gone. Things like that don't just stop." "No," Constantine agreed. "They don't. Does Zatanna know you're telling me this?" "She knows the conversation was going to happen eventually. She might have preferred it happen at 11. Harry considered this. "Why 11? That's when your world wants you." "Hogwarts." "Yeah. I've known about Hogwarts for 2 years, Harry said. "She doesn't know I know." Constantine looked at him. "I read ahead in Dad's journals," Harry said, unapologetically. Giovanni tracked the British wizarding world quite carefully. "There's a whole section. And I think I should go." He turned to look at Constantine. "Not because they want me to. Because I want to understand that side of what I am. The backward speech is Zatanna's, I love it, it's mine now, but I want to know what I am from my parents' side as well." "It'll be complicated," Constantine said. "Everything interesting is." Constantine looked at him for a moment, this 9-year-old in a garden in Marylebone, thin and precise and electric with contained power, talking about his fate with the measured curiosity of someone examining an interesting problem. "You're going to be a nightmare for everyone at that school," Constantine said. "Probably," Harry said. "Good." The year Harry turned 10, Zatanna sat him down at the kitchen table that had been replaced twice and currently bore no scorch marks because Harry had long since mastered the discipline of output control, and said, "We should talk about Hogwarts." Harry looked at her. "I know about Hogwarts." "I know you know." "How long?" "A couple of years." She exhaled. "John. He didn't tell me. I read ahead." She looked at the ceiling briefly. Then at him. "And I want to go," he said. "But I want to go as what I am. Not as the boy who lived. Not as the kid they've been waiting for. As me." She looked at him across the kitchen table, this 10-year-old who had arrived in her life 6 years ago in a cupboard with one change of clothes and a broken toy car, who now filled her house with books and questions and the specific warm complexity of a person becoming fully themselves. He was, she thought, already remarkable. He was warm and wickedly funny and endlessly curious. He was kind in a specific way that came from understanding what unkindness felt like, not performatively, not because he'd been told to be, but because he'd decided to be. He was completely unafraid of things that should have scared him, and appropriately cautious about things that deserved caution, and the distinction between those two categories was one she hadn't had to teach him, he'd arrived at it himself. He was also, magically speaking, the most formidable practitioner she'd encountered in any tradition at any age, and she'd been in this business long enough to have encountered quite a lot. "You're going to go in there," she said, "and they're going to have expectations. Let them. The professors will test them," he said. "Snape will be hostile. Dumbledore will be strategic. Everyone else will have decided who I am before I walk through the door. How does that make you feel?" He thought about this honestly. "Fine," he said. "Because none of it is accurate." She looked at him. "I know who I am," he said. "They'll figure out I'm not what they expected, and then we'll all move on from there. That part doesn't worry me." He paused. "What worries me is Voldemort." The kitchen was quiet. "He's not gone," Harry said. "I've been thinking about it. The magic doesn't, you can't just, something like that doesn't end cleanly." He found a way to persist. "I don't know the shape of it yet, but he's there." She'd reached the same conclusion through different reasoning. She'd checked, very carefully, through channels she hadn't told Harry about, and what she'd found was consistent with what he was describing, a presence, attenuated and degraded but unmistakably there, like an echo that hadn't finished traveling. "He'll surface," she said. "Yes," Harry said. "Probably while I'm at school." "Yes." They looked at each other. "I'm not going to hide from it," he said. I know it might be what Dumbledore wants, for me to deal with it. I know it might be exactly what the prophecy set up. But it's also," he paused, looking for the honest version, "it's also just mine to deal with. It killed my parents. I'm not walking away from that." She looked at her hands on the table for a moment. Then she looked at him. "If anything happens to you," she said, "I will take apart every dimension of magical reality until I find what did it and repay the favor in detail." Harry looked at her. A smile started somewhere at the corners of his eyes. "I know," he said. "I mean it." "I know," he said again. "That's why I'm not afraid of anything." She looked at him for another moment. Then she reached across the table and adjusted the collar of his jumper, the specific unnecessary gesture of a parent who needs to do something with their hands. "We've got a year," she said. "Let's use it." "I already have a curriculum," he said, and produced, from absolutely nowhere, a handwritten list of 12 things. She looked at the list. "Harry," she said. "Some of these are, you've written, temporal distortion, basic as an item." "Basic," he emphasized. "That is not a basic, I've already started on it." She stared at him. "Theoretically," he added, which helped not at all. She took the list. She marked 3 items no, 1 item not yet, 5 items yes, 2 items we'll see, and the temporal distortion item she stared at for so long he took it gently from her hand and said, "I'll put that one at the bottom." "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome." She looked at him across the kitchen table, her house, her extraordinary, impossible, deeply beloved child, and she thought, let them be ready for him. Please let them all be ready for him. She suspected they weren't. She taught him anyway. The last lesson before the Hogwarts letter arrived was in the garden, on a warm May evening, the roses finally in bloom, the light going gold and long across the grass. She stood at one end. He stood at the other. No wand, they'd been doing a lot of wandless work recently, building on the base that had established itself naturally years ago. "Show me the harmonic," she said. He raised his hands, not dramatically but just with the easy precision of someone doing something they'd done 1,000 times, and she felt both systems come up simultaneously, the wizarding magic and the backward speech, felt them find each other in the space between his palms. The light in the garden changed. Not subtly, not academically, it changed, it became something other than ordinary late evening May light, it became the light that existed when reality was listening, when the fundamental nature of things had decided to pay attention. The roses moved in a wind that wasn't there. The shadows pointed in 4 directions at once. Harry held it. Steady. Controlled. The harmonic vibrating between both traditions with absolute consistency, no scatter, no waste. Then he released it, and the garden went back to being a garden in Marylebone, and he looked at her with his hands at his sides and his hair as impossible as it had always been and his green eyes absolutely certain. "Good," she said. "Better than last time?" "Much better." He nodded. She walked across the garden toward him, and he met her halfway, and she put her hand on the back of his neck the way she had since he was small, a specific gesture, not quite a hug, something more compact than that, a point of contact that said here, "You're here, I've got you." He was nearly as tall as her shoulder now. "One more year," she said. "And then we see what Hogwarts is made of," he said. "Don't blow anything up in the first week." "No promises," he said, and she felt rather than saw the grin. "Harry." "Fine. No promises about the first month." She let go of his neck. She looked at him. "I'm proud of you," she said. "Just so you know. Not of what you can do. Of who you are." He went quiet in the way he did when something landed genuinely. "I know," he said, after a moment. "Soft and true. You show me all the time." The light went gold over the garden. The roses bloomed. Somewhere in a school in Scotland, an enchanted quill was writing a name on a list. Chapter 3, Letters from an Owl Who Looked Confused. The owl arrived on a Tuesday. It was a perfectly ordinary Tuesday in July. Harry was in the garden doing something with spatial equations that Zatanna had decided not to ask too many questions about, and she was inside at the kitchen table going through correspondence and drinking her second coffee of the morning, when a tawny owl hit the kitchen window with a sound like a small, offended thud. She looked up. The owl was sitting on the outside windowsill with a letter in its beak and the specific expression of a bird that had found what it was looking for and was very uncertain about the finding. It kept tilting its head at her, then at the garden, then back at her, with the manner of something that had expected a particular kind of destination and arrived somewhere that didn't quite match the brief. She opened the window. The owl stepped in onto the sill, looked around the kitchen with round amber eyes, noted the 3 books stacked beside the coffee maker, the botanical specimens drying above the sink, the faint luminescent quality the air always had in this house because magic lived in its walls the way damp lived in old buildings, and made a sound that was, in owl terms, something between impressed and unsettled. "Harry," she called. Footsteps across the garden. He came in through the back door, saw the owl, and stopped. There was a beat of recognition. She watched it happen in his face, the quick processing, arrival at a conclusion. "Already?" he said. "Already," she confirmed. The owl held the letter out toward him with a kind of formal resignation and Harry took it, examined the green ink on the front, Mr. H. Potter, The Kitchen, Townhouse, Marylebone, London, and raised an eyebrow at the address. "Accurate," he said. "Unervingly so," she agreed. He broke the seal and read the letter with the efficient speed of someone who processed written information faster than most people spoke it. She watched his face while he read. He looked like he was scanning an interesting but not surprising menu. "Hogwarts, a history says the first years get this letter and most of them have no idea what Hogwarts is," he said, setting it on the table. "Can you imagine? Finding out magic is real at 11 because of a letter. That's a very specific empathy failure, considering how you found out magic was real." "I already knew," he said, sitting down across from her. "I just didn't know what to call it." He glanced at the letter. "They want me there September 1st. King's Cross. Platform 9 3/4. The one that doesn't exist until it does," she said. "Giovanni's journals have about 3 pages on the enchantment mechanism. It's actually quite elegant." He reached over and took the second half of her toast without asking, which had been their kitchen dynamic since he was approximately 6 years old. "When do you want to do Diagon Alley? When do you want to do Diagon Alley?" He looked at the ceiling briefly. "Soon. Before the crowds. I want to look around properly, not fight through first-year families." He paused. "Also I want to see Gringotts. Because Because it's a goblin-run bank that's been operating for centuries in the middle of London and nobody in the Muggle world knows it exists, and the architectural and magical engineering required to maintain that concealment is, he caught her expression, interesting, he finished. We'll go Thursday, she said. He nodded. Finished her toast. The owl was still on the windowsill, watching him with what seemed like a professional interest. Do I need to send a reply? Harry asked it. The owl blinked. I'll take that as a no, he said, and offered it a piece of crust. The owl took the crust, gave the kitchen one final evaluating look, and departed with the air of something that had many more letters to deliver but would be thinking about this one for some time. Thursday came with the specific late July warmth that London occasionally produced as if to apologize for everything else the rest of the year delivered. Harry wore jeans and a dark green shirt and his glasses, and Zatanna wore what she wore when she wasn't performing, dark trousers, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, her hair back, and they took the tube to Charing Cross because it was straightforward and she liked the tube, and Harry spent the whole ride reading a small book about goblin metallurgy that he'd found in the Marylebone House's third-floor study. Put the book away, she said, as they pulled into their stop. One more paragraph. You can read it when we get back. I'm nearly at the part about Harry. He put the book away. He looked out the window at the dark of the tunnel. Then at her. Then, with the expression of someone moving on from a minor logistical setback, the leaky cauldrons hidden on Charing Cross Road. Between a bookshop and a record store. The enchantment that makes Muggles not see it is based on attention deflection rather than active concealment. It's technically the same principle as, I know, she said. I've been there. He turned to look at her. You've been to Diagon Alley? 3 times. The first time with your grandfather, with Giovanni. He had a contact at the apothecary. She stood as the train slowed. Your world and mine overlap more than either side tends to admit. He was quiet for a moment, absorbing this, and she could see him filing it. Zatanna has history with this world, more context than I assumed, factor into my model, and then they were on the platform and moving. Charing Cross Road was busy with tourists and the particular London mid-morning crowd. Harry spotted the leaky cauldron's entrance in under 30 seconds, which she'd honestly expected would take longer. Between the sheet music shop and the bookshop, he said, as they approached it. The deflection makes you want to look at the window displays on either side. If you know to resist it, he tilted his head, looking at the gap. It's actually quite clever. Layered. 3 separate workings. Don't take apart the architecture of every enchantment you encounter today, she said. It makes people uncomfortable. I wasn't going to take it apart, he said, mildly offended. I was admiring it. They pushed through the door. The leaky cauldron was dim and warm and smelled like old wood and something herbal and slightly off. Several patrons sat at tables with drinks, a variety of ages, a variety of robes, all of them with that particular quality of people who knew things that the world outside this building didn't. A few looked up when Zatanna and Harry came in. The barman, a bald, friendly-faced man, started to offer a smile and then did a small double-take, looking at Harry, looking at the scar on his forehead just visible above his glasses, and going a particular shade of pale. Blimey, he said, very quietly. Harry looked at him with polite interest. The murmur that started at the nearest table spread in a wave across the room, which was what murmurs did in small spaces when something noteworthy walked through the door. Zatanna felt the attention shift and settle, and she felt Harry feel it too, felt him make the instant assessment of the room, catalogue the attention, decide what to do with it. He did nothing with it. He gave the barman a pleasant nod and said, "Good morning. We're heading through to the alley, if that's all right." Of course, the barman managed. "Mr. Potter, sir, that is, wonderful to, Tom," said an older witch at the bar, appearing to have recovered from her own surprise more quickly than most. "Let the boy through." Tom blinked, collected himself, and nodded. "Right through the back, sir. Mississippi." He added this last to Zatanna with the practiced instinct of someone who had immediately clocked that she was either very important or very capable and in either case worth being polite to. Harry caught Zatanna's eye as they moved toward the back. She raised one eyebrow very slightly. "I told you." He raised one back. "I know." The courtyard behind the leaky cauldron was a brick wall with a bin and a couple of weeds. Harry stood in front of it, tapped the correct brick. He'd memorized the sequence from his grandfather's notes. He had, in fact, memorized most things he'd ever read, and the wall obliged. Diagon Alley opened before them like a question and an answer at the same time. Harry stood at the entrance for 3 full seconds, which was the longest she'd seen him be still in front of anything in years. It wasn't awe exactly, it was more like recognition. Like the specific pleasure of arriving somewhere that corresponded to something you'd already carefully imagined. The cobblestone street, the crooked buildings leaning into each other overhead, the storefronts with their impossible displays, books fluttering their own pages, cauldrons in ascending sizes, owls in cages looking supercilious about the whole business. The crowd moved with the particular energy of people who lived in a world adjacent to the ordinary one and had stopped noticing how extraordinary that was. "Right," Harry said, and walked in. Gringotts, as Harry had suspected, was the most interesting building on the street. It was also, Zatanna noted, the most rigorously warded, which was a statement given what this street contained. She felt the layered enchantments as they climbed the white marble steps. The defensive workings were old, some of them older than the building itself, embedded in the stone like geological strata. Harry ran his hand along the bronze doors as they went through, reading them the way some people read Braille. Inside, the goblin at the nearest counter looked up when they approached. He had the specific bright-eyed alertness of someone who had been in this job for a very long time and been surprised very rarely. He looked at Harry. At the scar. Down at his ledger. Back up. "Potter Vault," he said. "Please," Harry said. "And I'd like to speak to someone about my account overview, if possible. Full overview. I'm not familiar with what I have and I'd like to understand it properly." The goblin, his nameplate said Griphook, looked at him with an expression that ran through several stages before arriving at something that was almost respect. "You've not been before," Griphook said. "First visit," Harry confirmed. "I'd like to make a good one." Griphook looked at Zatanna. "His guardian," she said simply. Griphook made a note. "Someone will see you in 20 minutes. The cart for the vault in the meantime." The vault cart was an adventure. Harry braced against the rail without holding it, reading the enchantments on the tunnel walls as they shot through them. At one point they passed through a waterfall and he watched the water with a particular attention that told her he was analyzing the curse-breaking properties she could also feel embedded in it. The Potter Vault was, frankly, considerable. Not obscene, not the ancestral hoards of the oldest families, but substantial, the kind of accumulated wealth that spoke of several generations of comfortable, intelligent people who had not been frivolous with money. Towers of gold galleons. Boxes of silver and bronze. In the back, behind the coins, she caught the gleam of other things, documents, heirlooms, the kind of items that families kept in vaults because they were too significant or too dangerous for shelves. Harry stood in the entrance and looked at all of it for a moment. "My parents," he said. "And their parents before them," she said quietly. He was quiet for a beat. She watched him, not to check on him, but because she'd learned that Harry's quiet moments were usually where the most important things happened. "I wish I'd known them," he said. "I know." I'm not," he shook his head. "It's not sad, exactly. More like, a gap. Something that's missing the shape of something I never had." He looked at the vault. "They left me something real, though." "That's something." She said nothing. She'd learned when not to fill his silences. He took what they needed for the Hogwarts supplies. He was efficient about it, counted out exactly what he required, and as they left he looked back once at the vault with an expression that was private and complete and his own. The account overview with the senior goblin manager, a formidably weathered creature named Ragnar whose eyebrows appeared to be making a separate political statement from the rest of his face, took 40 minutes and was conducted with the mutual professional respect of two entities who had immediately identified each other as serious. Harry asked questions that made Ragnar pause twice. He signed the relevant documents with the swift authority of someone who had been processing legal instruments of various kinds since he could write. Zatanna had started him on magical contracts at 7, partly for the magical education and partly because she genuinely believed everyone should understand what they were agreeing to. When they left Gringotts, Ragnar stood at the top of the steps and watched them go with an expression that was, for a goblin, broadly appreciative. "You made a friend," Zatanna said. "I don't think that's their word for it," Harry said. "But he'll remember me." That was the point. That was part of it. He looked up the alley. If things go complicated later, if Voldemort comes back properly and there's a war, the goblins are going to matter. Their loyalty doesn't come from sentiment, it comes from demonstrated respect. I'd rather start on good terms. She looked at him. He shrugged. Constantine says politics is mostly just doing the work before the crisis so you have allies during it. That's the most useful thing John has ever said. He'd be horrified if he knew I was repeating it. Madame Malkin's was next, because robes were non-negotiable, and it was in Madame Malkin's that they encountered Draco Malfoy. He was already there when they arrived, a pale, precisely dressed boy with fair hair and grey eyes that had the particular quality of someone who had been raised to be the most important person in every room and had not yet encountered a situation that complicated this assumption. He was being fitted for robes and saying something to the seamstress in the tone of someone who expected their commentary to be received as helpful. He looked at Harry when Harry came in with the unguarded assessment of a child who didn't bother hiding his appraisals. His eyes found the scar, and his expression shifted, a flash of something that might have been awe, quickly recovered and replaced with studied composure. "Hogwarts too," he said. "Hogwarts too," Harry confirmed, stepping up onto the fitting platform. "I'm Draco Malfoy." He said it in the way people said things they expected to land. "Harry Potter." A beat. The seamstress kept measuring. "I know," Draco said, with carefully managed composure. "Everyone knows who you are." "Everyone knows a story about me," Harry said, looking straight ahead while the seamstress measured his arm. "Whether it matches the actual person is a different question." Draco considered this. He wasn't stupid, she clocked that immediately, watching him recalibrate rather than bluster. "What do you mean?" "I mean the boy who lived story is 10 years old and based on about 40 minutes of incident," Harry said. "Everything that happened after is not exactly public record." Draco glanced at Zatanna, who was sitting in one of the brocade chairs by the window examining a display of dress robe options with professional interest. "Is that your mother?" "Guardian," Harry said. "Zatanna Zatara. She's a magician." "I know who Zatanna Zatara is," Draco said, and something in his voice shifted. It was no longer the boy-to-boy assessment of two 11-year-olds meeting, it was something more carefully respectful. "My father's mentioned her." "Favorably?" Draco paused. "Not exactly," he said, with a specific honesty that suggested he found the ambiguity interesting rather than uncomfortable. He said she was formidable. And not someone to engage carelessly. "He's right on both counts," Harry said. Draco looked at him. The careful composure was still there but something behind it was working hard at something, reframing, she thought. He'd expected a particular kind of person and was actively adjusting. "Are you in contact with the wizarding world at all?" Draco asked. "You don't, you clearly weren't raised in it." "I've been in contact with what I needed to know," Harry said. "I'll learn the rest at school." "There are things that matter," Draco said. "Families. Alliances. History." "There are," Harry agreed pleasantly. "And I'll form my own opinions about all of them." Draco blinked. It was, she thought, probably the first time someone had said that to him in a context he couldn't easily dismiss. "You're not what I expected," Draco said. "I keep hearing that," Harry said. The seamstress announced that Harry's fitting was done. He stepped off the platform, adjusted his glasses, and looked at Draco with an expression that was genuinely neutral, not warm, not cold, a clean slate offered freely. "See you at school," he said. Draco watched him go with the expression of someone who had expected to make an impression and discovered instead that an impression had been made on them. Flourish and Blots was, predictably, where Harry came closest to not leaving on schedule. They had the entire first-year reading list and then several of the subsequent year's texts, and Harry moved through the shelves with the efficiently suppressed desire of someone who wanted all of them but understood that wasn't practical. He stuck to the list. He did also pick up, without putting them back, 2 texts that weren't on any Hogwarts curriculum she recognized, one on advanced magical theory written by someone named Bathilda Bagshot whose scope, apparently, went considerably beyond what students were assigned, and one slim gray volume on the history of magical traditions that he held for a moment longer than the others. "That one not on the list," she said. "It covers the intersection of different magical traditions," he said. "The chapter on Western wandless and Eastern wandless practices has a section on combined system theory that connects to what we've been working on." She took it from him, read the chapter heading, skimmed 2 pages. Handed it back. "Fine." He added it to the pile without triumph, which was the thing about Harry and knowledge. He never gloated about winning access to it because winning access to it was never the point. The point was always what came after. What you did with it. The shop was filling up as the morning went on, more Hogwarts families arriving for their lists. She noticed the social mechanics of it, parents navigating each other with the specific tension of people in a community where bloodlines mattered, children orbiting warily. She noticed Harry noticing it too, noting which families grouped together naturally and which moved around each other, which names made other families straighten their spines or look away. He said nothing about it, just looked and learned and filed. At the counter, paying, the assistant looked at Harry's stack with wide eyes and said, "Quite the reader, aren't you?" in the indulgent way adults address children with ambitious book selections. "I hope so," Harry said, as though quite the reader was a status worth pursuing rather than a pleasantry. The assistant blinked. "Well. Yes. Quite. They had ice cream after, because it was July and warm and because they'd earned it. Harry had chocolate. She had something with blackberries that the vendor made with actual magic, she could taste the working in it, a subtle preservation enchantment that kept it tasting like August in January. They walked slowly back through the alley, Harry with a cone in one hand and his bag of books over his shoulder, watching the street. "It's smaller than I expected," he said. "Physically. But the density of magical working in a square foot of this street is," he searched for the comparison, "more than anywhere I've been except your friend Diana's house. Don't tell Diana you're comparing her to a shopping district. I said the density was similar, not the application." He paused. "There's a lot of fear in this place." She looked at him. He was looking at the people around them, the way they moved, the small anxieties visible in the set of shoulders, the way conversations dropped when certain names came up even casually. 10 years on and it's still there," he said. "He's gone but nobody believes he's really gone. They're all still waiting." "Are they wrong to?" she asked, because she wanted to hear his thinking. "No," he said. "He's not gone." He took a bite of his ice cream. "But they're afraid in a way that's passive. Like they're waiting for someone else to deal with it. Like the last time was enough of an answer to last forever. It isn't. I know." He looked at her. "That's not going to be me, though. The passive waiting. If he surfaces, I'm not standing in a field somewhere hoping for the best." "No," she agreed. "You're not. Good." He finished his ice cream. She finished hers. They turned toward the leaky cauldron exit, and she was thinking about the route back to the tube, and Harry was presumably thinking about goblin metallurgy or spatial theory or any of the 17 other things that occupied his mind at any given moment, and that was when they walked directly into Gilderoy Lockhart. He emerged from Flourish and Blots with a crowd around him and a smile so practiced it had achieved a kind of structural integrity, blonde hair gleaming, robes the particular shade of turquoise that communicated wealth and vanity simultaneously. He was signing copies of his own books, which were stacked in a display that took up half the window, and he caught sight of them, specifically caught sight of Harry, and his face did the thing that famous people's faces did when they spotted something they could leverage. "Harry Potter," he said, with the warmth of someone who had expected this meeting. Harry looked at him with polite blankness. "Gilderoy Lockhart," the man said. "You've read my books, I'm sure." "I've heard of them," Harry said, carefully technically accurate. Lockhart barreled past this with the practiced ease of someone who didn't register what didn't suit him. "Magnificent timing, magnificent. Here, stand together, the cameras will love this." He produced a physical arm around the shoulder that Harry stepped away from with the fluid ease of someone who had been studying movement since age 7. "I appreciate the greeting," Harry said, "but I'm not really available for photographs today." Lockhart blinked. This was not a thing that happened to him. "I'm sorry." "We're shopping," Harry said pleasantly. "It's been lovely meeting you." He walked around Lockhart with the complete naturalness of someone passing a piece of furniture, and Zatanna followed, and she caught the expression on Lockhart's face in her peripheral vision, surprise, then recalibration, then the specific expression of a man who had just been dismissed by an 11-year-old and wasn't quite sure when it had happened. 2 steps later, quietly, Harry said, "He's performed most of those adventures himself on people who already did the work and had their memories erased." She kept walking. "You read the books?" "I read enough to know the magic doesn't add up." 12 books, all concluding with him performing the final act, always alone, always conveniently without witnesses. The specific spell he claims for the banishing banshee incident doesn't work the way he describes. He paused. "He's a fraud." "Yes," she said. "Good memory charms, though. Professional grade. That I'll give him." Harry filed this too, and she watched him do it. Lockhart, fraud, possible threat, effective at obliviation, and move on. Ollivander's was last on the list because she'd wanted it last, and because she suspected it would take the longest. The shop on the corner was narrow and dust-laden in a way that felt specifically intentional, like the dust was part of the atmosphere rather than the absence of cleaning. The wand maker himself emerged from between the shelves with the silent, somehow ageless quality of someone who had spent so long in the company of magic that it had seeped into the fabric of him. He looked at Harry. His silver eyes, unusual eyes, the kind that people with strong magical perception developed over decades, went to the scar first and then, almost immediately, past it, to something else. "Harry Potter," he said. Not with the breathless quality of someone encountering a legend. More like someone checking a list. "I wondered when you'd come in." "You expected me?" Harry said. "I expected you'd be interesting," Ollivander said. "I expect that about very few." He glanced at Zatanna with the specific acknowledgement of someone who recognized another serious practitioner. "Miss Zatara. I've heard of your work." "And yours," she said. He turned back to Harry. His gaze moved over him in a way that was less visual than sensory. She could feel him reaching out with perception, taking the measure of the magical field around the boy, and she watched his expression shift incrementally as he did. The slightly formal professional manner went quiet. Something more focused replaced it. "Your wand arm," he said. "Either, technically," Harry said. "I have a wand already, from Esmeralda's workshop in Notting Hill. I'm here because I need a Hogwarts-compatible wand as a secondary working implement." Ollivander went very still. "You already have a wand," he repeated. 3 years, Harry said. "Holly. 10 inches. May I?" Harry held out his right hand, the wand appearing in it from wherever he kept it. She'd never quite worked out the spatial mechanics of how Harry kept things, suspected he'd solved the problem with a working he'd never fully explained to her. Ollivander took the wand with the reverence of a man holding another craftsman's work. He examined it, turned it, held it near his own hand to feel its resonance. "Esmeralda," he murmured. "Yes. I recognize the technique." He handed it back. She told me, once, that she'd made a wand for someone where the direction of transfer was inverted. That the practitioner channeled through the wand instead of the other way. He looked at Harry. I didn't entirely believe her. It's accurate, Harry said. Ollivander was quiet for a moment. Then, with the manner of someone shifting their approach entirely, I don't think we'll be doing the standard trial today, he said. Come with me. He took Harry to the back of the shop, not the usual wall of boxes but a smaller, darker section she'd never seen the shop have before, possibly because it hadn't needed to be there before. He brought out 3 boxes, unhurried, and opened them one at a time. The first wand, he had Harry hold it, pulsed once and went still. It acknowledges you, Ollivander said. But it's not primary. You'd cast fine with it, exceptional by normal measures, but it's not, it's borrowing, Harry said. The power flows through fine but there's no conversation. Ollivander looked at him sharply. You can feel that distinction. Can't you all? A silence. No, Ollivander said, carefully. Most wizards feel a wand as right or wrong. Good or poor. Very few can articulate the quality of the exchange. He set that wand aside. The second. Phoenix feather core. 11 inches. When Harry took it, the reaction was different, both of them went still simultaneously, practitioner and wand maker, and she felt the pulse of it from across the shop, a surge that wasn't violent but that had presence, the kind of magical moment that left an impression in the air. Harry looked at the wand. Ollivander looked at Harry. This wand's brother, Ollivander said, very quietly, gave you that scar. Harry didn't look up from the wand. I know, he said. It's been waiting, Ollivander said. 10 years. I've sent it out twice and it came back both times. I've always suspected that it would wait for me, Harry said. Yes. Harry turned the wand over. 11 inches, reasonably supple. Holly, she noted, same wood as his primary wand, which didn't surprise her. Does it matter? He asked. That they're brothers. It might, Ollivander said. If you ever face the one who holds the other. I'll face him eventually, Harry said, still looking at the wand. And I'll have both of these when I do. He looked up at Ollivander. And something in his expression, the complete certainty of it, the specific forward-looking quality of a person who had thought about this and arrived at preparedness rather than dread, made Ollivander stand up very straight. I've sold wands for 70 years, Ollivander said. Every wand I've ever made or sold, I remember. I know the person and I know the wood and I know the core and I know what the combination was capable of. He looked at Harry steadily. I cannot tell you what you're capable of because I don't have a category for it. That's all right, Harry said. I'll figure it out as I go. He tucked the second wand alongside the first, and the combined presence of both of them in one person's hands produced a resonance in the shop that made the boxes on the shelves whisper against their neighbors, and Ollivander stood in the back of his shop and watched them go with an expression she'd catalogue later as relief. The tube home was quiet. Harry had his goblin metallurgy book open again, and Zatanna looked out the window at the dark of the tunnels and thought about everything the day had contained. Harry, she said, at one point. The wand. The brother wand. Are you all right about that? He considered the question properly, which was what he always did, not the reflexive reassurance that everything was fine, but the actual internal check. It's a connection, he said. To him. Uncomfortable in the abstract. He turned a page. But a connection is something you can work with. I'd rather have it than not. Why? Because magic responds to relationship. You've always said that. The wand's relationship to its brother is a known quantity. That's information. He glanced up. Information is better than mystery, every time. She looked at him. What? He said. Nothing, she said. Just thinking you've grown up. I'm 11, he said. I have a long way to go. You really don't, she said. He looked faintly embarrassed, which was one of her favorite expressions of his, rarer than it should have been. They surfaced from the tube into the London evening, the day's heat still held in the pavement, the city doing its usual inexhaustible evening shift around them. Harry had his bag of books and his 2 wands and his vault number memorized and a mental map of Diagon Alley's magical infrastructure, and he was already thinking about something, she could tell, the slightly inward focus, the quiet that meant his mind was elsewhere. What? She said. The Hogwarts houses, he said. I've been thinking about which one. And? I could see the argument for most of them, he said. But the hat sorts on character, not ability, and my character is, he paused, seeming to genuinely consider it, I want to know everything and I'm not particularly cautious about pursuing it. That sounds like Gryffindor or Ravenclaw depending on which quality you weight. Which do you think it'll be? Gryffindor, he said, with no particular pride or disappointment, just assessment. Because the knowledge isn't the end goal. What I do with it is. She thought about this. The hat might argue. The hat is welcome to, he said. She laughed, genuinely, the kind that happened when he surprised her even after years of him surprising her. You know, she said, as they turned onto their street, there's a version of the next 7 years where you walk into that school and have a perfectly normal educational experience. Clubs. Quidditch. Exams. He looked at her sideways with the specific expression that told her he knew she didn't believe this. There's also a version, he said, where something is very wrong with one of the professors before term even starts. She stopped walking. He stopped with her. What did you feel? She said. Not feel, exactly. Read. He reached into his bag and produced the slim grey book, the one about magical tradition intersections, from Flourish and Blots. There's a chapter on magical cohabitation. Specifically, the magical signature patterns that occur when 2 distinct magical entities occupy the same body. He held the book out to her. The relevant passage was already marked. I noticed it when we were near the school supply section. A professor buying supplies for the defense class. Turban. He had a normal wizarding signature on the surface and something else underneath. Something that read like, a second presence, she said. Yes. They looked at each other on the pavement outside their house in the evening light. Quirrell, she said. Probably. He put the book back in his bag. I didn't get close enough to be certain. But the layered signature matches what a parasitic magical attachment would produce, she said. Which Voldemort is capable of, he said. If he's sufficiently degraded. If he needs a host. The word sat between them, Voldemort, with its full weight. He's already moving, Harry said. It wasn't alarmed. It wasn't scared. It was the specific tone of someone receiving a piece of information that confirms what they already suspected. He's at Hogwarts before I am. That's almost elegant, in a horrible way, she said. He doesn't know what he's walking into, Harry said. She looked at her 11-year-old standing on the pavement with his bag of books and his 2 wands and his absolute, uncomplicated certainty. No, she said. He really doesn't. They went inside. She made dinner. He set the table and read his book and asked her 2 questions about parasite class magical attachment while she cooked, and she answered them, and the evening went on in the specific ordinary way that extraordinary households managed, the warm light, the smell of food, the comfortable rhythm of 2 people who had made a home together. Later, she stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at him doing his reading and thought about September 1st and Platform 9 3/4 and a school in Scotland that was about to receive something it had absolutely not prepared for. She thought about Quirrell and what rode on the back of his head and the plans it had for her child. She thought about Dumbledore, and his careful long games, and the boy who had been intended for the center of them. She thought about Harry saying he doesn't know what he's walking into. She decided, going to make absolutely certain of that. She went and got her own book and sat at the other end of the table. They read until midnight. Chapter 4, the boy who arrived the Hogwarts Express left at 11 o'clock, which meant that Zatanna arrived at King's Cross at 9:45, because she believed in margins. Harry arrived at 9:45 and 3 minutes because he'd been rereading the Giovanni Journal section on Parasite Class magical entities and lost track of time, and she'd had to call up the stairs twice. The station was already busy with the particular controlled chaos of families in transition, Muggle travelers moving through their ordinary Tuesday morning, and threaded through them, the other kind, the families with trunks and owls and robes peeking out under Muggle coats, navigating the same space with the practiced ease of people who'd done this for generations. Harry had his trunk, packed with specific precision, nothing unnecessary, everything ordered by access priority, and his school bag over one shoulder, and he was looking at the barrier between platforms 9 and 10 with the expression he wore when examining enchantments. "Don't," she said. "I wasn't going to take it apart." "You were looking at it like you were going to take it apart." "I was appreciating it," he said, which was what he always said. He tilted his head. "The concealment mechanism is more interesting than Diagon Alley's. It works with motion, the barrier reads your intent as you approach and either presents as solid or opens, depending on whether you know what it is." He glanced at her. "It's extraordinarily elegant for something that old." "Walk through it," she said. He walked through it, trunk and all, with the casual confidence of someone stepping through a door they'd opened 1,000 times, and she followed, and the noise of King's Cross fell away and was replaced by something warmer and louder and denser with magic, the scarlet engine, the steam, the crowd of families all in the same place at once, everyone oriented toward the same departure. The Hogwarts Express was, she had to concede, a beautiful thing. Harry stood on the platform and looked at it with something that was close to the awe she'd expected in Diagon Alley. He had grown up mostly in her world, the DC magical community, Constantine's circles, the borderlands where different traditions intersected, and wand work in school robes and an enormous red steam train were, despite all his reading, still the specific texture of something genuinely new. "It's very red," he said. "It is. Aggressively red." "Harry. I'm just noting." She took his trunk to be loaded and he stood on the platform with his school bag and his hands in his pockets and she turned back to him and they looked at each other. This was the thing she hadn't fully prepared for, not his safety, not the Quirrell situation, not Dumbledore's inevitable machinations, all of which she'd prepared for extensively. The thing she hadn't prepared for was this moment, the specific texture of it, standing on a platform about to watch him leave for the first time. He was 11. He was the most capable 11-year-old in any magical tradition she had encountered. He was going to be fine. She knew all of that. "I have the mirror," he said. Two-way communication mirror, their version. "And the emergency working if anything goes genuinely wrong." "I know," she said. "And Constantine has the secondary contact array." "I know. So you don't need to, Harry," she said. He stopped. She put her hand on the back of his neck, the specific gesture, the one that said "Here, you're here, I've got you." "Write me," she said. "Not about crises. About the ordinary things. What the food is like. Whether the astronomy tower is as good as it sounds. Whether the ghosts are interesting." He was quiet for a moment. Then, with the particular quality that meant he was being entirely genuine, "I will. And if Quirrell escalates, I'll handle it and then tell you," he said. "In that order." "Reversed," she said. "Tell me first." "Zatanna, tell me first," she said. "Then handle it." He looked at her with the expression he wore when he judged an instruction to be procedurally suboptimal but was choosing to respect the source. "Fine," he said. Simultaneously. She gave him one more second of the hand on the back of his neck and then let go. "Go," she said. "Don't blow anything up in the first week." "Month," he reminded her. "Week," she said firmly. He smiled, the full one, the one that had stopped being rare around age 7 and was now simply his, and turned and got on the train, and she stood on platform 9 3/4 with her hands at her sides and watched the door close behind him. The train began to move. She watched it go. Then she put her hands in her pockets and walked back through the barrier into King's Cross, and took the tube home, and sat at the kitchen table with a coffee in the specific quiet of a house with one fewer person in it, and did not think about all the ways things could go wrong, because that was not useful. She made a list of preparation instead. It was 7 pages long by the time she was done. The Hogwarts Express took the better part of the day, moving north through England into Scotland, and Harry spent the first hour in a compartment by himself reading, the Bathilda Bagshot text, the advanced one he'd bought in Flourish and Blots, and the second hour occupied by the compartment door sliding open. He looked up. A girl stood in the doorway with bushy brown hair and an expression of determined social efficiency. She was doing the thing where she was trying to look casual about the fact that she'd clearly been working up to this particular door. She was carrying a very large book. All the other compartments are full or, she paused, complicated. Can I sit here? Harry looked at her. At the book. At the expression of someone who was simultaneously nervous and clearly very intelligent and rather used to both of those things. Yes, he said. What are you reading? She blinked, apparently this was not the opening she'd braced for. She held the book up, A History of Magic by Bathilda Bagshot. He held up his own copy. She looked at it. Then at him. Then, with the specific intensity of someone finding an unexpected but welcome data point, you're reading the advanced text. It's more accurate, he said. The standard version skips the 14th century almost entirely. She sat down across from him with the decisive movement of someone who had made a decision. The Goblin Rebellion section in the standard text is practically useless. 3 paragraphs on events that shaped an entire century of wizarding politics. She said this with the conversational fluency of someone who'd spent a lot of time being the only person in the room who had read something thoroughly. For rebellions and they name one, Harry agreed. And misattribute the cause. She stared at him. He looked at her steadily. Hermione Granger, she said. Harry Potter, he said. Another beat. Her eyes went briefly to the scar, everyone's did. He'd already become very good at not reacting to it, and then back to his face, where they stayed, which told him she was less interested in the scar than in the person beneath it. Also useful data. I've read about you, she said. Obviously. Everyone has. What did you make of it? He asked. The available accounts are thin on detail and extremely heavy on mythology, she said, with a kind of brisk precision that he found immediately useful. There are 3 books that cover the night of your parents' deaths and none of them agree on basic facts. They don't, he confirmed. What's your best guess at the accurate version? She looked at him with an expression he'd learned to recognize as her "Is this a test" face. Based on what I know about the killing curse and its mechanics, it's irreversible, which means the rebound that supposedly destroyed you-know-who couldn't have been the same curse. The protective magic your mother used, she paused. Love-based protection magic is documented but poorly understood. The working she performed must have been extraordinary. She was extraordinary, Harry said. From what I can find. Hermione was quiet for a moment, reassessing. You didn't grow up in the wizarding world. No. But you know it. I've been preparing, he said. So have I, she said, with a slight emphasis that told him she'd prepared very hard and was used to being the most prepared person in any given situation and was currently recalibrating that assumption. Good, he said. Then you'll be interesting to talk to. She opened her book. He opened his. They read in the same comfortable silence for about 20 minutes. The 14th century section, Hermione said, without looking up. What does the advanced text say about the schism of 1397? He told her. She had 3 follow-up questions. He had 2 of his own. The conversation that followed lasted until the trolley came by. They both bought chocolate frogs, examined the cards with scholarly interest, and Harry ended up with an Agrippa he didn't have and Hermione ended up with a Paracelsus duplicate she offered to trade, and then continued after. ranging through goblin politics and theoretical spell mechanics and the specific gaps in standard wizarding education that both of them had independently noted. At some point, he couldn't have said when, it stopped being two people exchanging information and became something more like a conversation, which was different, which had a different quality of engagement, the specific warmth of finding someone who thought about things the way you thought about things and wasn't exhausted by how far down into a subject you wanted to go. It was, he thought, what having a peer felt like. He hadn't had one before. He hadn't entirely known he was missing it. Hogwarts was, from a distance, everything the books had suggested and then some. From the boats across the lake, first year's traditional approach, the giant Hagrid shepherding them through the dark with a lantern the size of a small dog, it rose from the rock above the water with the specific grandeur of something that had been building itself for 1,000 years and was comfortable with the result. Every tower was lit. The reflections made the lake look like it contained a second castle, and the boats moved through that doubled light quietly, the only sound the water and the occasional nervous conversation. Harry sat in a boat with Hermione and two others, a boy with red hair who'd introduced himself as Ron Weasley with the unconscious familiarity of someone who assumed everyone already knew his family name, and a small boy named Neville who was holding his toad with both hands and breathing carefully. Ron had looked at Harry with the bright-eyed interest of someone who'd grown up with the mythology and was trying to reconcile it with the actual person. He'd been straightforward about it. "You're really Harry Potter, then?" "Really," Harry confirmed. "You don't, I expected." Ron seemed to decide mid-sentence that whatever he'd expected was probably embarrassing to admit. "I expected something different," he finished. "Most people do," Harry said. "What are you, then?" Ron asked, with the bluntness of a youngest of many child who'd learned early that diplomacy took longer than directness. "Complicated," Harry said. "In a good way, mostly." Ron had considered this, apparently found it acceptable, and moved on. She was going to like Ron Weasley, Harry thought. There was a fundamental honesty in him that he trusted on instinct. Now, in the boats approaching the castle, Harry watched Hogwarts come closer and felt it, the magic of it. Not just the spells layered in the stones but the specific quality of a place that had been saturated with magical life for centuries. It felt the way the Marylebone House felt, like the walls had absorbed what had happened in them, except older and denser and vastly more complex. And underneath it, very quiet, like a bad note held beneath a chord, the presence. He'd caught it in Diagon Alley. He felt it properly now. Not strong, degraded, thin, the kind of magical signature that came from something greatly reduced. But there. Persistent. Patient in the way that things were patient when they had no other option. He looked at the lit windows of the castle. Somewhere in there, a professor with a turban was teaching defense against the dark arts. Harry looked at the castle and the castle looked back at him, and the presence in it shifted slightly, the way things shifted when they sensed something approaching that they hadn't accounted for. "Good," he thought. "You should pay attention." The sorting was conducted in a hall that was, in scale and atmosphere, one of the most impressive spaces Harry had ever been in, and he'd been in rooms that existed partially outside regular dimensional space. The enchanted ceiling was extraordinary. He looked at it and felt the working behind it, the specific elegance of a spell that had been maintained and refined across centuries, a living enchantment that read the actual sky and translated it continuously. Not a recording. A real-time connection. He made a note to find out who had originally constructed it. The Sorting Hat song was delivered with the theatrical confidence of something that had been performing the same material for 1,000 years and had stopped caring about critical reception. Harry listened to it with genuine interest. The hat was a remarkable magical construct, a piece of self-aware enchanted intelligence sophisticated enough to conduct psychological evaluation and make nuanced judgments, which raised fascinating questions about the nature of magical consciousness that he put in the mental queue for later. Names were called alphabetically. Hermione went before him, Gryffindor, the hat barely touching her head before the announcement, and she sat at the table with the expression of someone vindicated, and then more names, and then, Potter, Harry. The hall went silent. He walked up. He felt it, the specific silence, the 1,000-person intake of breath, the weight of expectation pressing from every table. He sat on the stool. The hat came down over his eyes. Darkness. And then, well, said a voice in his head, dry, ancient, curious in the way that things were curious when they rarely encountered something new. This is unusual. I've been told that before, Harry thought back. I imagine you have. A pause. He felt the hat actually looking, not reading, exactly, but perceiving, taking the measure of things that didn't have easy external expression. Two magic systems. Both fully integrated. Neither dominant. Do you know how rare that is? I have some idea. Brave, the hat said. Obviously. But that's not the interesting part. Curious, fiercely, comprehensively. Loyal in a way that's chosen rather than instinctive. Ambitious, not for status, but for knowledge, for capacity, for, yes. You want to be capable enough that the things that are coming can't take anything else from you. Harry said nothing. The girls with the fire, the hat said, more quietly. You remember the cupboard. A silence in his own mind. You're not afraid, the hat said. But you remember what fear felt like, and you've decided what to do with it. Yes, Harry thought. Gryffindor, the hat said. Without question. Not because you're reckless, you're not, but because you understand that some things are worth walking toward regardless. A pause, and then something that felt like the magical equivalent of a nod. Good luck, Harry Potter. I suspect you won't need it. But good luck. Gryffindor, the hat announced. The Gryffindor table erupted. Harry took the hat off, handed it back, walked to the table. He sat beside Hermione, who was clapping, and across from a cluster of Weasley family members who were all making noise, and he looked up the table at the staff table out of habit and took inventory. Dumbledore at the center, watching him with the warm, calculating attention he'd had on the doorstep in Marylebone 6 years ago. Harry gave him a neutral nod. Dumbledore inclined his head. The rest of the staff, various faces, various magical signatures, the specific variety of a long-established institution. And at the end of the table, the presence. Professor Quirrell was a slight, nervous-seeming man in a turban who appeared, on the surface, to be exactly what his manner suggested, anxious, mild, the kind of person you wouldn't look at twice. The stutter, when he spoke to the student nearest him, was performed with the unconscious fluency of someone who'd been doing it long enough for it to feel natural. Harry looked at him for approximately 3 seconds. The presence on the back of Quirrell's head felt his attention like a hand touching it, flinched, and the man himself went briefly rigid before recovering. Harry looked away, back to the feast that had appeared on the table. He picked up his fork. Roast potatoes, he told Hermione. Good ones. She looked at him. Did you just, yes, he said. We'll talk later. Eat first. She gave him the this conversation is not finished look, which he'd already learned to recognize in approximately 4 hours of acquaintance, and served herself. He was right about Snape from the moment the man entered the room. Potions was on the schedule for the second day, and Harry had read ahead, of course he had, working through the second-year text as well as the first to get the shape of the curriculum before experiencing it. He arrived to the dungeon classroom with Hermione, both of them early, and found it already cold and starkly lit in the way of spaces that had become extensions of their inhabitants' personality. Snape arrived without preamble, assessed the room in one sweeping glance that contained more information than most people's extended observation, and said, in a voice designed to establish permanent acoustical dominance, "There will be no foolish wand-waving or silly incantations in this class." He began calling roll with the specific deliberateness of someone building toward a particular moment. "Potter," he said, when he reached it. And then, with a precision that told Harry the question was not pedagogical, "What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" He knew this question. He knew the whole sequence of questions. It was famous, or would be, if he'd talked to any second years, and he knew what Snape expected from a famous boy who'd grown up outside the wizarding world. He knew what it was designed to produce. "Draught of living death," he said. "One of the most powerful sleeping potions known. The asphodel, in the right preparation, is almost the active component. The wormwood infusion creates the suspension medium and moderates the potency. The mistake most students make is in the infusion temperature, which affects whether the wormwood's properties bind properly with the asphodel." He paused. "The name's interesting too. Asphodel is associated with the afterlife in classical tradition. Wormwood with bitterness and grief. Whoever named this potion had a dark sense of poetry." The classroom was very quiet. Snape looked at him with black eyes that had gone through several things at once. "Where the bezoar comes from," Snape said, apparently choosing to continue regardless. "Stomach of a goat," Harry said. "Used as a universal antidote, or nearly universal. It won't counter everything, but it's fast and broadly effective, which makes it more useful in a genuine emergency than a perfectly targeted antidote that takes 20 minutes to brew." "The difference between monkshood and wolfsbane." "There isn't one," Harry said. "Same plant, different names. Also called aconite. Extremely poisonous, controlled ingredient, but used in wolfsbane potion in a very specific preparation to manage lycanthropy symptoms." He met Snape's gaze with absolute evenness. "Though I'm sure you know that better than most people in this room." The silence took on a different quality. Snape looked at him for a long moment with an expression that had stopped doing the thing it was supposed to be doing and was now doing something more private. He said nothing. The lesson continued. Harry brewed. His potion was, at the end of the session, exactly what it was supposed to be, and he handed in his sample and collected his things and walked out with Hermione, who had barely contained herself for the entire class. "In the corridor, you knew all of that already." "Yes. You made him angry." "I was polite." "You were," she said, aggressively polite. "It's a very specific tone." He glanced at her. "Can you tell the difference between polite and aggressive polite?" "It's my natural register," she said, and he laughed, genuinely surprised, and she looked pleased that it had landed. "Snape expected me to not know," Harry said, as they headed for the stairs. He expected the boy who lived to be performance without substance. And instead he has to revise his approach, Harry said. "Which he will. He's too intelligent not to." "Is that better or worse?" she asked. "Different," Harry said. "I'd rather be taken seriously than dismissed." He paused. "Even if seriously means someone deciding I'm a problem." Defense against the dark arts was, for obvious reasons, where Harry paid the most attention. Quirrell taught with the stutter and the nervous manner, moving through the material with the specific quality of someone performing below their actual capability, giving the class less than the subject deserved, which told Harry that whatever rode on the back of his head was not interested in students learning effective defense. Harry sat in the second row and felt the presence the entire time like background noise, not aggressive, not reaching, just there, existing in the space between Quirrell's performed nervousness and the thing wearing him. After class, when most students had filed out, Harry stayed behind arranging his bag. Quirrell was erasing the board with his back to the room. Harry said, conversationally, "The garroting gas demonstration was interesting. I don't think the ventilation wards are quite calibrated right, though. The dispersion pattern's slightly off. There's a concentration in the northwest corner that the ward isn't catching." Quirrell went still. Not the nervous man still of someone startled. The other kind. He turned around, and his face was doing its performance, the wide eyes and the uncertain smile, but underneath it something else looked out and took measure. Harry looked back pleasantly. I suppose I'll have to check that," Quirrell managed. "Worth it," Harry said. "The student in that corner was Neville Longbottom, and I like him." He picked up his bag. "Good class, Professor." He walked out. In the corridor, he let his casual expression go and replaced it with something more precise. The presence had felt him looking. Had taken his measure. Was now, probably, reporting back to its diminished but persistent host. Good, Harry thought. Know what you're dealing with. He went to dinner. Quidditch tryouts happened in mid-September, and Harry went because Oliver would asked him with such genuine passionate urgency that declining felt actively cruel, and because the idea of flying had been in his peripheral interest since he'd first read about it. Flying, it turned out, was extraordinary. He'd done a lot of things that touched on the sensation, spatial workings, the particular quality of the harmonic when it lifted and expanded, but nothing had prepared him for the specific physical reality of it, the broom between his hands and the ground dropping away and the wind and the sky becoming everything. He stayed up there for 20 minutes longer than the tryout required, just flying, just getting used to the space and the movement and the absolutely unreasonable joy of it. Wood watched from the ground with the expression of a man who had found something he needed. Harry came down and Wood said, "You're Seeker," and Harry said, "I know very little about the actual game," and Wood said, "I'll teach you everything," with the specific intensity of religious devotion, and Harry thought, fine, yes, this is worth learning. Hermione, who had strong opinions about sports as an educational priority and had expressed them in detail when Harry told her, "You're going to be good at it, aren't you?" "Probably," he admitted. She sighed the sigh of someone who had strong principles and was regularly confronted with their limits. "Don't let it interfere with your revision schedule." "I don't have a revision schedule." "That's the next problem," she said, and produced a timetable that she'd clearly already made, which he took and looked at and noted was excellent, and her expression shifted into the satisfied one she wore when competence was properly recognized. "This is very good," he said. "I know," she said. Halloween arrived with a storm and a troll and a sequence of events that Harry had been approximately 1 week ahead of. He felt the shift in the castle's magical atmosphere in the afternoon, the specific disturbance of something genuinely large and magically dense moving through the lower corridors, the wrongness of it cutting through the background hum of normal Hogwarts enchantments. He was at dinner when Quirrell burst in. The performance was well done, the panic, the swaying, the dramatic announcement of a troll in the dungeon, and Harry watched it with the awareness of a person watching a play they'd helped write. Around him, students panicked appropriately. Prefects organized. Dumbledore's voice cut through the hall with the practiced authority of a man who'd handled worse. Harry leaned to Hermione, "Where's the troll actually heading?" She blinked. "What?" Quirrell said dungeon, but the magical displacement I felt was moving toward the upper corridor near the girls' bathroom. If Hermione Granger were to be in that bathroom right now, he watched her face do something complicated. "You went there at lunch," he said. "Ron Weasley said something thoughtless and I suspect you've been there all afternoon." She looked at him with an expression that was simultaneously mortified and recalibrating. "How did you know about, people talk and I listen," he said. "Come on." He stood up, which was entirely contrary to the instructions being given by the prefects, and walked toward the corridor. Hermione stood and followed him with the expression of someone who had decided that this was happening and she was going to be useful in it. Ron, 2 seats over, watched them go, made a face at the ceiling, and followed. The bathroom corridor was cold and smelled like something large and old and not indoor suitable. Harry felt the troll's magical signature before he heard it, magic of the dumb, persistent kind, not clever but vast, the kind of power that came from scale rather than intention. He pushed the door open. The troll was a 12-foot mountain troll with a club and the specific blankness of a creature that operated on hunger and stimulus. It had not yet noticed the corner of the bathroom where Hermione had pressed herself under the sinks. Harry assessed the situation in approximately 1 second. He raised his wand, primary and secondary both, and said, not dramatically, but with the specific focused clarity of someone for whom this was simply a problem to be solved, Ilatelpmach ffo Ilsa. Completely off, asleep. The troll made a sound like a mountain relocating and hit the floor. The entire bathroom shook. 3 mirrors cracked. A pipe burst from the impact. Hermione stared at the troll. At Harry. At the troll. "You," she started. "Are you hurt?" he asked. No. What was that? Sleeping working, he said. Backward speech. It went cleanly, it'll be out for about 2 hours. He put the wands away. We should be somewhere else when the professors arrive, or there's going to be a very long explanation. I want to hear the explanation, Hermione said, standing up from under the sinks and brushing dust from her robes with remarkable composure for someone who'd just been 3 feet from a mountain troll. Backward speech. That's not from our tradition. No, Harry said. I have too. Ron, in the doorway, was looking between the 12-foot unconscious troll and Harry with an expression that had several layers. You just knocked out a mountain troll. Yes. With words. Backwards words, technically. Ron looked at the troll again. Then at Harry. Right, he said. I'm going to need to think about this. Take your time, Harry said, and they left the bathroom, and the professors arrived 4 minutes later to find the troll unconscious and 3 first-year students standing in the corridor looking varying degrees of innocent. Professor McGonagall's expression as she looked at them was the specific expression of a teacher who already suspected the official story she was about to be given was going to be incomplete. Harry gave her the incomplete version. It was accurate as far as it went. McGonagall looked at him, at the wand he was holding, which was the secondary one, the Hollyann Phoenix feather, the standard wizarding implement, and then at the troll visible through the open bathroom door, and her expression did something complex. 5 points to Gryffindor, she said. Each. 4, presence of mind. Thank you, Professor, Harry said. She looked at him for 1 more second. Potter, she said, quietly, while Ron and Hermione were doing something at the other end of the corridor. Yes. You're not what I expected, she said. I hear that a lot, he said. A pause. Then, more quietly still, I imagine you do. She straightened. Go to dinner. The feast will have restarted. He went. The first real conversation with Dumbledore happened in early November. Harry was summoned, politely, via a note delivered by a second-year prefect, to the headmaster's office, and he arrived on time, climbed the moving staircase, knocked, entered, and found Albus Dumbledore behind a desk surrounded by silver instruments that clicked and whirred with the contentment of enchanted objects in the presence of their maker. Harry, Dumbledore said, with the particular warmth that had an entire calculation behind it. Please sit down. Harry sat. He looked at the office with genuine interest. It was extraordinary, the accumulated workspace of a genuinely formidable magical practitioner over many decades, every object significant, every placement deliberate. How are you settling in? Dumbledore asked. Very well, Harry said. I understand potions has been eventful. Professor Snape is an excellent teacher, Harry said. Once he recalibrated his expectations, the classes have been productive. Dumbledore's eyes did the twinkling thing. And defense against the dark arts. Interesting, Harry said, with a specific weight on the word that he let Dumbledore interpret. A pause. The instruments clicked. I've had a letter from Zatanna, Dumbledore said. She writes to me too, Harry said. She expresses concerns about certain aspects of the school's current staff composition. She's not wrong to, Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him over his spectacles. The warmth was still there, but something behind it had shifted, the acknowledgement, carefully given, of someone who'd been caught in a strategy. You know, Dumbledore said. Yes, Harry said. Since when? Diagon Alley. The magical signature was clear enough once I knew what a parasite class attachment looked like. Giovanni Zatara documented several in his journals. He paused. You've known since he returned from his travels. A beat. Yes, Dumbledore said. Harry looked at him, at this extraordinary, complicated man who had let him stay in a cupboard because the alternative complicated his plans, who had set the board the way he wanted it before Harry was old enough to have opinions about it, who was still, even now, doing what he always did, calculating. He didn't say any of that. He'd already said it through Zatanna 6 years ago. The saying of it wasn't the point anymore. What's protecting the stone? Harry asked. Dumbledore blinked. This was, apparently, not what he'd expected. I'm sorry. The Philosopher's Stone, Harry said. Flamels. You moved it from Gringotts to Hogwarts in July. There was a break-in attempt the same day we visited, which seems related. It's here, somewhere below the school, protected by what I'm assuming is a series of challenges. He looked at Dumbledore steadily. What's protecting it? The twinkling had stopped. How, Dumbledore said, slowly, do you know about the stone? Giovanni's journals have an entry on Nicholas Flamel. The Gringotts break-in was in the Prophet the next day. The rest is logic. Harry tilted his head. He'll go for it eventually. Quirrell's not here for the teaching. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, with the specific quality of someone adjusting their approach significantly, the protection is multi-layered. Several of the staff have contributed. What's the last layer? Dumbledore looked at him for a moment. A mirror. What kind? The mirror of Eriste, Dumbledore said. It shows the viewer their deepest desire. I have modified it so that only someone who wants to find the stone, not use it, can retrieve it. Harry thought about this. That's genuinely clever, he said. The stone is protected by wanting the right thing. He paused. He'll need a host with the right kind of desire. Or he'll need to think he wants to find it rather than use it. Which is considerably more difficult than it sounds. For most people, Harry said. He looked at Dumbledore. Why did you put it here? At a school. You know he's already here. Dumbledore held his gaze. I had reasons. I'm sure you did, Harry said. Not angry. Just naming it. Another silence. The instruments clicked. The fire made its fire sounds. Harry, Dumbledore said, and for a moment the calculation fell back from his voice and something more direct came through. I owe you several things. Including an apology. Harry looked at him. The Dursleys are not something I spend time on anymore, Harry said. Zatanna is my family. That's settled. He paused. But I'll accept the apology for what it covers. Dumbledore nodded. The question of what's coming, Harry said, is not one I'm afraid of. I want you to know that. Whatever you planned for the boy you thought I was going to be, I'm going to deal with this differently. Effectively. I've gathered that, Dumbledore said, and now there was something in his voice that was, cautiously, almost hope. I wonder if you might consider, telling you my plans. Harry smiled, the first genuine one since he'd walked in. Not entirely, no. But I'll tell you this, I'm not going to let him get the stone. Dumbledore looked at him. You're 11. Yes, Harry said. And you've had 40 years and he's still coming back. He stood up. I think it might be time to try something different. He left the office. On the moving staircase going down, he let the expression he'd been maintaining drop for just a moment, felt the tiredness of it, the performance of certainty, the holding of posture, the specific effort of being unintimidated in a room with one of the most powerful wizards alive. He wasn't afraid of Dumbledore. But he felt the weight of the room, the accumulated history of it, the plans and the years and the loves and the losses that had built the man behind the desk. He gave it a moment. Then he put it down. He had defense homework. And a letter to write to Zatanna. He went back to Gryffindor Tower. Chapter 5, What the Mirror Doesn't Show. December arrived at Hogwarts the way it arrived everywhere in Scotland, decisively, with no apology and a great deal of weather. The castle became something else in winter. The enchanted ceiling went the specific dark grey of heavy cloud for days at a time, and the fires in every common room became the organizing principle around which student life arranged itself, and the corridors accumulated the specific atmosphere of a building full of people who were simultaneously relieved exams were over and anxious about going home or not going home, depending on the circumstances. Harry's circumstances were clear. He was going home for Christmas. He told Hermione this while they were in the library 2 weeks before the end of term, and she looked up from her Transfiguration essay with an expression he'd learned to read as "I want to ask something personal but I'm working out if it's appropriate." "You're close with her," she said finally. "Zatanna." "She's my mother," Harry said, which was the word he'd arrived at sometime around his 8th birthday and used without complication. Hermione looked at him with the particular attention she brought to things that mattered. "You don't talk about your parents. Your biological parents. Ever." "I think about them a lot," he said. "Talking about it is different." He looked at his book. "She keeps a photograph for me. My mother holding me when I was very small. I have it in my room here. Does it help?" "Yes," he said. "Having something real is better than the mythology." He paused. "You grew up Muggle-born, you didn't have the mythology. What was it like, finding out about all of this?" She gave him the courtesy of treating the redirect as a genuine question rather than avoidance. "Overwhelming. Then wonderful. Then overwhelming again in a different way." She tucked her quill behind her ear. "I read everything I could find before I got here. I thought being prepared would make it less, but it's different when it's real. When it's actually your life." "Yes," he said. "I imagine you found the same thing." "I grew up in it," he said. "But this," he tilted his head, meaning the castle, the school, the robes and the history and the specific texture of the British wizarding world, "is different. It's the other half of what I am. And I'm still figuring out what that means." She was quiet for a moment. "Then, Ron asked me if you were frightening." Harry looked at her. "I told him you weren't," she said. "That you were, capable. There's a difference." "What did he say?" "He said, that's a very Hermione way of saying frightening," she said, with the fond exasperation she reserved for Ron's specific brand of honesty. "He'll figure out the difference eventually." "He already likes me," Harry said. "He just doesn't know what to do with the gap between the story and the actual person." "Most people here have that problem," she said. "Not you." "I don't pay much attention to stories," she said. "I prefer data." He smiled at her. She went back to her essay. Outside the library windows, the first snow of term had started, and the grounds of Hogwarts went quiet under it the way things went quiet when the world put on something new. He came back from Christmas different. Not fundamentally, he was still exactly himself, but there was a quality of settledness to him in January that Ron noticed and couldn't articulate and that Hermione catalogued as he went home and was reminded of what he's working from. What had actually happened was simpler and more significant than that. He'd told Zatanna everything. Not the letters, which had covered events, he'd written weekly, as promised, the ordinary things alongside the significant ones, but the everything that letters didn't hold. The quality of the castle. What Snape's classes actually felt like. What Quirrell felt like at close range. The conversation with Dumbledore. The growing sense of the stone somewhere beneath the school, its magical presence a kind of low bass note in the enchantment of the place. She'd listened the way she listened to important things, completely, without performing attention, just giving it. Then she'd said, "You're handling it well." "I'm handling the visible parts well," he'd said. "The thing I can't fully handle is not knowing when he'll move." "He'll move when he thinks you're not ready," she said. "Then I need to always look ready. Or genuinely be ready," she said. He'd spent 4 days training. Not the structured training of their weekly sessions but something more intensive, the harmonic work, the combined system exercises, the specifically targeted things that applied to a degraded spirit entity in a human host. Zatanna had spent most of those 4 days pushing him harder than she usually did, not cruelly but with a specific precision, finding the edges of his control and pressure testing them. On New Year's Eve, standing in the garden at midnight, London's fireworks going off in the distance and the roses winter bare under a clear cold sky, she'd done something she'd never done before in their training. She'd come at him full power. Not a lesson. Not a calibrated exercise. The real thing, Zatanna Zatara, fully realized, bringing everything to bear, the backward speech and the magical tradition and the decades of genuine mastery. He'd held it. Not easily. Not comfortably. He'd been pushed hard, working faster than he ever had, the two systems in him firing simultaneously in ways that made the garden air crack and the roses shed petals in January, and she'd given him everything she had and he'd answered every piece of it. At the end, they'd stood in the garden in the cold, both of them breathing harder than usual, and she'd looked at him with an expression he'd remember for the rest of his life, not pride exactly, not satisfaction exactly, but something that held both of those and something more, something that was about the specific quality of watching someone become fully themselves. "You're ready," she'd said. "I know," he'd said. "Don't let it make you careless." "It won't," he said. "I know what I'm fighting." "That's not carelessness, that's preparation." She'd put her hand on the back of his neck, the gesture, the one that said here, "You're here. Come home safe," she'd said. "Whatever else happens." "Always," he'd said. He'd meant it the way he meant things, completely. January and February passed with the specific texture of a school in winter, exams in the early part of term, Quidditch in all weathers, the library as a constant, the warmth of the common room in the evenings as the wind came off the mountains and made the castle creak. Harry caught the snitch in his first proper Quidditch match 20 minutes in, which ended what had been a compelling game rather abruptly, and Wood's expression cycled through elation and faint disappointment before settling on elation. The Gryffindor stand went, as Ron put it, absolutely mental. Harry came down from his broom and found that he didn't have very much to say about it. Flying was extraordinary. The rest of it was fine. In February, Neville Longbottom found him in the corridor after herbology and said, with the careful courage of someone who had prepared for a conversation, "Can I ask you something?" "Yes," Harry said. "In the bathroom." "Halloween." "What you did," Neville looked at his shoes and then back up, deciding directness was worth it. "What was that?" "The words." "It wasn't, it's not anything in our books." "No," Harry said. "It's a different tradition. Backward speech." He watched Neville's expression, which was going from nervous to genuinely curious, and made a decision. "Come to the library after dinner. I'll explain it properly." Neville looked like someone who had braced for a shorter answer. "Really? Knowing how something works is almost always better than not knowing," Harry said. "Especially in defense." Neville came to the library. Harry explained the underlying theory of backward speech, not teaching the full system, that would take years, but the concept, the way intention and language interacted, the specific principle of inverted reality relationship. Neville listened with the focused attention of someone who'd spent years being told magic was beyond him and was recalibrating that information. "So it's not a different kind of magic," Neville said, slowly. "It's a different language for the same thing." "Roughly," Harry said. "The power source is the same. The delivery mechanism is different. And you have both." "I grew up with both," Harry said. "My mother, Zatanna, is her tradition. My birth parents were this one." He turned his wand over. "The combination is," he paused, looking for the word, "interesting." Neville looked at the wand. "What's it like?" "Having two." "Like being bilingual," Harry said. "After a while you stop thinking about which one you're using. The right language comes for the right thing." Neville thought about this for a long time. Then, quietly, "I'm not very good at this one. The standard one." "You're better than you think," Harry said. "I've watched you in herbology. The way you handle magical plants, that's not just knowledge, that's instinct. You have the relationship right. That's the hardest part." Neville looked at him uncertainly, like someone waiting for the catch. "There wasn't one." Harry meant it. Thank you, Neville said, simply. Don't mention it, Harry said. Same time next week if you want to continue the theory. Neville said he did. March brought Hermione into the section of the library that Harry had been quietly working through since January, the restricted section, which he'd accessed 3 times via a permission note from Professor Flitwick, who had responded to Harry's request with the expression of a teacher who recognized a student operating in good faith and was pleased to support it. She found him at a corner table with 3 books open in a configuration that suggested cross-referencing rather than sequential reading, and a scroll beside him covered in his handwriting, which was small and precise and nothing like the scrawl most students produced. "What are you working on?" she said, pulling out the chair across from him. "Protective enchantment theory," he said. "Specifically the intersection of different categories, blood protection, spatial warding, and mirror class enchantments." She looked at the open books. "This is about the stone." "Yes." She sat down, pulled the nearest book toward her, read a paragraph. Looked up. "You're not planning to just wait and see if someone deals with it." "Someone will deal with it," he said. "The question is who and when and under what circumstances." "You think it'll be you?" "I think it'll need to be," he said. "Dumbledore is many things but he's been managing this situation rather than resolving it, and management only works until it doesn't." He looked at his scroll. "Quirrell's been getting more unstable. The magical signature's been shifting, the host is deteriorating. Whatever's riding on him is pushing harder." She was quiet for a moment, processing this. He'd explained the full Quirrell situation to her and Ron in February, matter-of-factly, in the common room after hours, without drama. Ron's response had been a long pause followed by, "So the defense teacher is sort of being warned by Voldemort," delivered with the specific flatness of someone whose whole frame of reference was being stress-tested. Hermione had asked 6 clarifying questions and then gone very pale and then said, "Right, then what's the plan," because that was who she was. "What do you actually need me to do?" she asked now. He looked at her. "I might need a second pair of eyes on the enchantment work. Some of the mirror class theory is in a gray area. The research on Erased specifically suggests that the desire-based access mechanism has a secondary function that isn't in most academic texts." She took the book. "Read the relevant section." Her expression shifted into the focused one she wore when something was genuinely interesting. "The mirror doesn't just show desire," she said. "It amplifies it. The person looking in is temporarily subject to an enhanced version of whatever they want most. The reflection isn't passive, it's active," Harry said. "Which means if Voldemort looks into it, he won't just see the stone," Harry said. "He'll be overwhelmed by wanting it. The desire will be absolute. And Dumbledore's modification means that state of absolute desire is precisely the state that can't retrieve it." "Elegant," she said, with genuine appreciation. "Very," he agreed. "But it has a problem." She thought. He waited, because he'd learned that giving Hermione 3 seconds to arrive at a conclusion herself was worth more than simply delivering it. "The modification works on the desire to use the stone," she said, slowly. "But if someone found a way to want it for a reason they genuinely believed was good, a man who genuinely believed immortality was necessary to finish important work," Harry said. "Who wanted it not for power but for continuation. For all the things he still needed to do." She looked up at him. "Quirrell believes in him," Harry said. "Not as a tool. He genuinely believes Voldemort's return is necessary. He wants the stone for a reason he thinks is righteous." He turned his quill over. "That might be enough." Hermione was quiet. "We need to be there before he reaches the mirror," Harry said. "Not to follow him, to be there first." "How will you know when?" "I'll know," he said. "The presence has been louder this week. Something's shifted." She looked at him. "Are you going to tell Dumbledore?" "I'll try," he said. "But Dumbledore has a way of receiving information and filing it into his own framework, and his framework has us waiting rather than acting." He met her eyes. I'm not very good at waiting when I know something's happening. I know, she said, not critically. Accurately. Will you help me? He said. She looked at the books open on the table. At the scroll. At him. Of course I will, she said. That was never a question. April became May and Harry felt the castle change. Not seasonally, though that too, the grounds going from winter grey to the specific vivid green of a Scottish spring, the lake changing character, the trees at the edge of the forest finding their leaves again. He felt it magically. A tension developing in the lower corridors, in the third-floor section that was officially off-limits, in the specific region below that where the stone sat in its chamber behind its protections. Quirrell was deteriorating visibly. He missed 2 classes. When he appeared for the third, his hands shook continuously and he knocked over his own demonstration materials twice and his eyes had the quality of someone not entirely present in their body, not an act, not the performed nervousness, something real, the specific hollowness of a person being used beyond sustainable limits. Harry watched him and felt the presence on the back of his head more urgently than he ever had. It was almost time. He told Ron in the common room the last week of May, sitting by the fire after hours, the dormitory empty above them, Hermione on his other side with a book she wasn't really reading. Tonight, Harry said. Ron looked up. You're sure? The magical atmosphere below the third floor has been building for 3 days, Harry said. It peaked about an hour ago. He'll move tonight. Ron was quiet for a moment. Then, with the specific quality of someone who has decided to be brave because the alternative is worse, right? So what do we do? Hermione and I go down, Harry said. You don't, I'm coming, Ron said, in the tone that meant the discussion was finished. Harry looked at him. I'm not sitting in the common room while you two do something dangerous, Ron said. No. I'm coming. Harry thought about arguing. He thought about what Constantine had said about allies and the work you did before the crisis. Fine, he said. But I need you to understand that some of what happens down there will look strange. Stranger than knocking out a mountain troll with backwards words. Ron said. Yes, Harry said. Ron took this in. Okay, he said. I'll manage. They went at midnight, under Harry's invisibility cloak, which he'd found in his belongings at Christmas with a note that said it was his father's, left for him anonymously, and which Zatanna had immediately confirmed as a genuine Deathly Hallow via mirror with an expression that suggested she was having conversations with people about this that she wasn't sharing with him yet, all 3 of them crowded underneath it, moving through the castle in the specific dark of a building at night. The third-floor corridor was empty. The locked door was not an obstacle. Harry opened it without the wand, simple wandless working, the lock mechanism was straightforward, and they went through. The trapdoor. The devil's snare. The key room. The chessboard. Harry moved through the protections with the specific efficiency of someone who had thought about this extensively, which he had. Devil's snare needed light, he gave it light, and the plant retreated before they needed to struggle with it. The key room needed the right key among hundreds of flying ones. He felt for the enchantment signature, found the correct one in under a minute, and unlocked the door without a broom. The chessboard was the only one that gave them genuine pause. Ron, who had grown up with wizard chess and played it the way some people breathed, looked at the board and went quiet in the calculating way he went quiet when something required his specific ability. Let me do this one, he said. Harry looked at the board. He could solve it, probably. He'd read enough game theory to see the lines, but he could also see that Ron was already 3 moves deep in his head, his eyes tracking pieces with the specific focus of someone in their element. All right, Harry said. What followed was the best and most devastating display of chess Harry had ever witnessed live. Ron played with a complete disregard for his own position, sacrificing pieces, offering himself in calculated exchanges, restructuring the entire board with the ruthless clarity of someone who understood that winning sometimes required losing things on purpose. He took the white queen's blow directly to clear the path. He went down hard. Harry and Hermione were at his side before the piece had finished moving, and Harry checked him, no serious injury, dazed, would be fine, and looked at Ron's face, which even unconscious had something resolved about it, the expression of someone who'd done what they'd set out to do. "Stay with him," Harry told Hermione. She looked up at him. "Harry, the troll already established I can handle things in confined spaces," he said. "And you're better equipped to monitor his condition than anyone else here." He met her eyes. "I need you here." She held his gaze. He could see her processing it, the argument she wanted to make, the alternative she wanted to propose, and the honest conclusion she was reaching regardless. "Come back," she said. "Without question," he said. He went through the door. The last chamber was cold and lit with black-flamed torches that cast light without warmth, and the mirror of Eriste stood at the far end of it like a question someone had made physical, tall, ornate, its surface showing not this room but something else, something that shifted with whoever looked. Quirrell was already there. He stood before the mirror, staring into it, and the quality of the staring was wrong, not the absorbed quality of someone seeing their desires, but the frantic quality of someone who couldn't find what they were looking for, who was looking and getting nothing useful back. Harry walked into the room. Quirrell turned. The stutter was gone. Whatever performance he'd maintained all year had nothing left to maintain it. "Potter," he said. His voice was low and flat. "Quirrell," Harry said. They looked at each other across the cold room. Harry felt the presence on the back of the professor's head the way he'd been feeling it all year, but louder now, closer, the degraded intelligence of it pressed against the surface of Quirrell's body with a desperation it hadn't had before. "The mirror won't show you the stone," Harry said. "You want to use it. The enchantment reads that." Quirrell's eyes narrowed. "You're very informed for 11. "I had good sources," Harry said. "Giovanni Zatara's journals are comprehensive on mirror-class enchantments. And Dumbledore mentioned the modification directly." He tilted his head. "You've been here for 20 minutes already. If it was going to work, it would have. Unless," said a different voice, and the temperature in the room dropped 2 degrees, "we have someone else look into it." Quirrell began to unwrap his turban. Harry watched it happen without moving, without expression, just present and attentive and ready, the way Zatanna had taught him to be in the moment before something became what it was going to be. The back of Quirrell's head, when revealed, was wrong in the specific way that things were wrong when a fundamental boundary had been violated, a face where no face should be, grey-pale and hollow-eyed and looking at Harry with recognition and something that in another context might have been called hunger. "Harry Potter," Voldemort said. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, from the ruined face and from the cold air and from the specific resonance of a presence that had persisted through diminishment because it was nothing but will, nothing but the stripped-down pure intention of a thing that refused to stop. "I know who you are," Harry said. "What you are. Where you've been." "Then you know what I want," Voldemort said. "The stone," Harry said. "Yes. You won't get it." Bold statement from a child standing in front of me. "I've been standing in front of you all year," Harry said. "You didn't notice until now." A silence. The black-flamed torches made their soundless light. "The Zatara woman," Voldemort said. "You've been raised by her." "Yes." "A mistake," he said. "On her part and yours. She has made you think you are ready for this." "She's made me ready for most things," Harry said. "This one I've been preparing for specifically since October." "You are 11 years old. You're barely a face on the back of someone else's head," Harry said. "We're both working with what we have." Quirrell's body moved, faster than a deteriorating host should have been able to move, Voldemort driving it with the specific urgency of something that had stopped caring about consequences. Harry moved. Both wands came up simultaneously, primary left, secondary right, and the harmonic fired. Not as 2 separate workings, not as one system with the other supplementing it, but as the thing it had been since that afternoon in the garden when it had first fully formed, the third thing, the translated thing, the working that approached from two directions and met in the middle. Ignite and be, he said, be nothing, and pushed both systems through it. Quirrell hit the harmonic like running into a wall. The working expanded outward from the point of impact, found the parasite class entity attached to the host, differentiated between the two magical signatures with the precision that came from 12 months of being aware of both, and split. Quirrell went to his knees, gasping. Voldemort came off him. Not cleanly, not completely, a tearing, the specific violence of an entity being separated from a host it had occupied for months, a visible distortion in the air that had sound and feeling and the temperature of something that shouldn't have been exposed. The form that emerged was barely a form, more will than substance, the raw intent of something that had stripped itself of everything except the refusal to end. It hit Harry. He braced, both systems fully active, and the contact was like nothing he could have described to someone who hadn't felt it, the cold of it and the weight of it, and underneath both of those, very clearly, the fear. Not Harry's fear. Voldemort's. He felt it in the point of contact between the degraded spirit and his own magical field, the specific quality of something that was afraid, not of pain, not of defeat in this moment, but of the thing Harry was, the specific impossible fused tradition harmonic that it had never encountered, that its centuries of magical knowledge had no category for. What are you? Voldemort said, but it wasn't threat now, it was something else. Harry held the harmonic steady. Kept both systems running. Felt the pressure of the presence pushing against his field and pushed back with everything he had, not furiously, not with drama, but with the specific patient force of something that had its foundations in place. Yas ibrit I, Harry said, quietly. Mfo tuoeb. I say thereby, be out of me. The inverted speech and the wandless intention fired together, and the combined working hit the degraded presence with the force of both traditions simultaneously, and Voldemort, not defeated, not destroyed, but expelled, tore loose and scattered. The cold went with him. The torches made their ordinary light. Harry stood in the sudden quiet with both wands leveled at air that was just air again, his breathing controlled, his system still active, waiting. Nothing. He held the ready for 10 more seconds, because that was what you did when something might be faking, and then he let the harmonic go and stood in the chamber with the mirror of Eriste on one side and Quirrell on the other, collapsed, very still, barely breathing. Harry went to him. He was alive. Barely. The magical damage from being occupied and then separated was significant, the kind of damage that didn't come from Harry's working but from the entity that had used him and then torn out of him. He looked at Quirrell's face, not the horror of a man hosting a Dark Lord, just the face of a man, a person who had made terrible choices and been used by them as much as he'd used them. He said, quietly, Nicro dlo flesruoi, hold yourself working, and pushed a stabilizing working through it, the kind Zatanna had taught him for emergencies, the kind that bought time rather than cured anything. Then he went back through the door to find Hermione. She was where he'd left her, Ron's head in her lap, Ron awake now and looking pale but present. She looked up when Harry came through the door, and what crossed her face was something he'd remember, the specific relief of someone who'd been managing their fear very carefully and had just been told they could stop. Done, she said. For now, he said. Quirrell needs help, I've stabilized him but he needs a healer. He looked at Ron. How do you feel? Like a chess piece sat on me, Ron said, which given that a chess piece actually had, was accurate. Did you? He's gone, Harry said. Not destroyed. Gone. Ron processed this. But the stone, still in the mirror, Harry said. He never got it. He crossed to the mirror, looked into it for just a moment. He saw what it showed him. He stood there for 3 seconds, long enough to note it, and then turned away from it and back to his friends. Let's go, he said. What did you see? Hermione asked, not intrusively, just asking. He looked at her. At Ron on the floor. At this cold chamber where something enormous had just happened. Home, he said. Same as always. She looked at him for a moment and then nodded, and they helped Ron up, and together they went back through the protections, Harry dismantling each one cleanly on the way through, because they'd been designed to keep people out and he saw no reason to leave them active, and up through the trap door and out into the third-floor corridor and back into the castle, which was still dark, still sleeping, entirely unaware. They were halfway to Gryffindor Tower when Dumbledore appeared at the end of the corridor. He was dressed and his expression was the specific one of a man who had felt something significant happen in his school and come to investigate, and when he saw the three of them, Harry in front, Ron limping, Hermione with her arms full of things she'd gathered from the floor of the chessboard room, his expression went through several things. He looked at Harry. Harry looked back. "The stone is safe," Harry said. "Quirrell needs a healer. He's in the last chamber. I left a holding stabilization on him but it's temporary." He paused. "Voldemort is gone. Not permanently, he'll find another way eventually. But he's gone from here." Dumbledore was very still. "Are you hurt?" he said, and his voice had something in it that was separate from headmaster, separate from chess player, something more direct. "No," Harry said. "You're friends." Ron took a knock from the chess set. "Hermione's fine." He held Dumbledore's gaze. "We're all fine, Professor." Another silence. "The mirror," Dumbledore said. "Still there. The stone's inside it. You should probably decide what to do with it now that its concealment has been compromised." He tilted his head. "I'd recommend not keeping it at a school." Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. "No," he said quietly. "I don't suppose I should." He stood aside to let them pass. Harry walked by him, and as he did, Dumbledore said, very quietly, "Thank you, Harry." Harry paused. Looked at him. He thought about the cupboard. About the plans and the calculations and the boy Dumbledore had needed him to be. He thought about the specific complicated truth of this man, the genuine love for the world he was trying to protect, and the genuine damage done in the protecting of it. "Take care of Quirrell," Harry said. "He made terrible choices, but he was used worse than he chose." He went to Gryffindor Tower. Zatanna arrived at Hogwarts the next morning. He hadn't called her. She'd felt it, the harmonic firing at full intensity, the contact with the spirit entity, all of it coming through whatever sense she'd developed for him over the 7 years of proximity and care. She arrived at the gates at 8 in the morning and McGonagall let her in with the specific expression of a teacher watching a parent arrive who was simultaneously relieved and braced. Harry met her in the courtyard. She walked toward him with the specific fast walk of someone who'd been managing fear for several hours and was about to be allowed to stop, and when she reached him she looked at him, checked him, hands on his face, the way she'd done when he was small, and said nothing for a moment. He let her look. He understood what she needed. "I'm fine," he said. "I know," she said. "I can feel it." She dropped her hands. Her expression was doing something complicated. "You handled it." "Yes." "The working, clean," he said. "Both systems." The harmonic held perfectly. She breathed in. Out. Stood up straight. The complicated expression settled into something that was, underneath everything, deeply pleased. "Tell me everything," she said. They walked the grounds, the morning cold, the dew still on the grass, the lake silver under cloud, and he told her everything. She listened with her hands in her pockets and her eyes on the ground, occasionally asking precise technical questions about the working and its mechanics, occasionally going quiet in the specific way that meant she was absorbing rather than processing. When he was done, she walked in silence for a moment. "The harmonic," she said. "When it hit the spirit entity, what did it feel like?" "Like, 2 notes finding each other," he said. "And what they made together was a third thing that neither one was alone." He thought about it. "I think that's what it's always going to be. The fused version isn't one system or the other. It's both, and it's something new." She looked at the lake. "Your father's journals predicted something like this theoretically," she said. The intersection of traditions at sufficient power. He thought it might produce something that operated outside the normal category framework. Did he write about what it could do? He wrote several questions, she said. He didn't have answers. I'll figure them out, he said. She smiled. The genuine one, the unperformed one. I know you will. They walked. Dumbledore, she asked. Was honest about his limitations in a way he hasn't been before, Harry said. I think what happened last night changed something in how he's thinking about this. Good. He's still going to manage rather than resolve, Harry said. That's his nature. Probably, she agreed. But managing looks different when you can't predict the outcome. You mean me. I mean you, she said. He stopped walking. She stopped with him and looked at him, and the morning was very quiet, just them and the lake and the castle behind them and the grounds around them with their spring-wet grass. He's not gone, Harry said. I know that. Yes. He'll come back. Different. There are other things, other objects, other plans, he shook his head. This isn't the end. No, she agreed. It's not. But it's a start, he said. I know what the harmonic does against him now. I know what his fear feels like. I know what he doesn't have a category for. He looked at her. That's enough for now. She looked at him steadily. Her son, 11 years old, who had faced down the most feared Dark Lord in a century and felt his fear, and was standing in a morning field talking about it with the measured clarity of someone who understood that this was the shape of the thing they were in, not the end of it, and was ready for that. Yes, she said. That's enough for now. They stood there for another moment, the lake going silver-green as the clouds shifted and let some sun through. You're really not afraid, she said, and it wasn't a question, just a thing she was confirming. Not of him, he said. Not anymore. He glanced at her. You're still slightly afraid. For you, she clarified. Completely different. I know, he said. That's why it doesn't bother me. She put her hand on the back of his neck, brief and real. Come on, she said. I want to meet Ron and Hermione properly. He smiled. Ron is currently eating his way through the breakfast table. He's stress-eating. Understandable, she said. Hermione is probably revising. Also understandable. They walked back toward the castle. Chapter 6, The Shape of Fate. The end of term came slowly and then all at once, the way most things that have been building for a long time arrive, a period of quiet and then the sudden acceleration of finality, the castle shifting character as the school year wound down and students began their particular packing and partying and exam surviving. Harry sat his end-of-year exams with the specific equanimity of someone who had spent 11 years preparing for something considerably harder. Transfiguration he found elegant. Charms he found satisfying. Potions he found interesting in the specifically technical way that he found most things interesting. Snape's exam was harder than any other teacher's, and he finished it 20 minutes before the allotted time and sat with his hands folded and felt Snape's gaze on the back of his neck for the remainder of the period and didn't look up. Hermione, to his left, finished 3 minutes after him, which she reported to him afterward with the expression of someone who was deeply competitive about this one specific thing and was working on not being. 3 minutes, she said. You checked, he said. I was aware, she said, which was a different answer. Your essay was probably more comprehensive than mine, he said honestly. Mine was precise. Yours would have been precise and thorough. She considered this. That's not nothing. It's quite a lot, he said. She accepted this with the satisfaction of someone who had been appropriately recognized and could now let the scoreboard go. The last week was warm and strange, the specific atmosphere of endings, of a year full of things that hadn't existed before September now fully real and solid and permanent. Ron taught Harry and Hermione a wizard card game that involved mild explosions and required excellent reflexes, and laughed when they both lost spectacularly in the first round and less when Hermione began systematically dismantling his winning strategy by the third. Neville came to find Harry on the last Wednesday and stood in the doorway of the common room with an expression that had resolved itself into something considerably more settled than the boy who'd knocked on the corridor door 3 months ago. "You changed how I think about magic," he said, and said it fast, the way things that are genuinely meant sometimes had to be said to get out. "The theory you explained. The way you talked about it being a relationship. I've been thinking about it in herbology, in every class, and I'm doing better." "I know," Harry said. "I've been watching." Neville went slightly red. "I just wanted to say. I'm glad I could help," Harry said. "Keep going with it. The relationship principle applies everywhere, not just in herbology. When you start feeling like magic is something you're doing with rather than at, everything changes." Neville nodded. Then, with the directness of someone who had gotten better at it, "What you did in the dungeons, everyone knows something happened, they just don't know what. There are at least 12 different versions going around. Which is your favorite?" Harry asked. Neville considered. "The one where you tamed the troll from Halloween into a companion animal and brought it to fight Voldemort." Harry stared at him. Neville's expression cracked. It was, Harry thought, the first time he'd seen Neville genuinely amused, and it looked good on him. "That one's not accurate," Harry said. "Most of the interesting ones aren't," Neville said. The end-of-year feast was the official Dumbledore production, house points tallied, Slytherin ahead as they'd been all year, then the usual moment of final points being awarded that Harry watched with detached interest. When Dumbledore rose to speak, the hall went quiet with the specific attentiveness that a room full of children gave someone who was consistently interesting. "Another year finished," Dumbledore said, with the warmth that Harry had spent the year taking apart and finding genuine beneath the performance. "There are some additional points I would like to award." He looked around the hall with the half-moon spectacles and the long beard and the specific quality of someone who knew exactly what effect they were having. "To Mr. Ronald Weasley, for the best played chess this school has seen in 40 years, and for the specific courage that sacrificed his own position to secure the way forward. 50 points. The Gryffindor table erupted. Ron went the color of his hair. "To Miss Hermione Granger, for outstanding analytical thinking under pressure, and for understanding that sometimes the right action is knowing which action is yours to take. 50 points. Hermione sat very still with an expression Harry recognized as the one she wore when she was intensely moved and intensely committed to not showing it. Her eyes were bright. "And to Mr. Harry Potter," Dumbledore said. The hall's attention shifted. Harry felt it the way he felt most collective things, as a pressure, a weight, the specific sensation of many people looking at you simultaneously. "For," Dumbledore paused, and in the pause Harry heard him making a choice about what to say and how to say it, "for exceptional nerve and ability, and for demonstrating that the most important quality a person can have is knowing precisely who they are." He met Harry's eyes across the room. 60 points. The recalculation happened audibly, the students doing the arithmetic, and then the Gryffindor table, and parts of both Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw, went loudly glad about it. Slytherin went quiet with the specific silence of people who had been certain of something and found it removed. Harry caught Draco Malfoy's expression across the hall, not the furious reaction he'd expected, but something more complicated, the expression of someone recalculating on multiple tracks simultaneously. He gave Draco a nod. Draco held his gaze for a moment and then looked away, which was its own kind of answer. The banners changed. The feast continued. Ron said something that made Hermione laugh properly, the full unself-conscious kind she sometimes forgot to suppress, and the evening went the way endings did, quickly and warmly and with the specific quality of things that would be remembered. The morning of departure, Harry found Dumbledore. He went deliberately, chose the time, found the early hour when the headmaster was visible crossing from the castle toward the greenhouses in the morning light, and fell into step beside him with the ease of someone joining a walk they'd been expected at. Dumbledore looked at him sideways but didn't alter his pace. You sought me out, Dumbledore said. Before I leave, yes, Harry said. There are some things I want to say directly. I appreciate direct, Dumbledore said. In my experience, most people aren't. Most people want something from you, Harry said. I don't, particularly, which makes directness easier. The morning was good, cool still, the grounds wet with dew, the edge of the forest catching the early light. A good place for a serious conversation, Harry thought. No walls. No instruments clicking. Just the open grounds and honest air. The stone, Harry said. I'd like to know what you decide to do with it. I'm going to discuss its destruction with Nicholas, Dumbledore said. Good, Harry said. You're not going to argue for the alternative? Flamel's immortality, not my life, Harry said. Not my choice. His. He glanced at Dumbledore. Though I'll note that Flamel has had 600 years and you're asking him to give that up. That's a significant ask. It is, Dumbledore agreed. Nicholas understands it. I think he's probably at peace with it in a way that most people his age aren't, Harry said. Long enough and peace starts to look like the more interesting proposition. He paused. Like my mother. Dumbledore looked at him. Lily? She chose to die for me, Harry said. Not out of despair or resignation. She chose it the way you choose something you've decided is the right thing. That's not sadness. That's a kind of extraordinary clarity. They walked. I've been thinking about the protection she left, Harry said. The love-based enchantment. It's why Quirrell couldn't touch me, the remnant of it on my skin burned him. Yes, Dumbledore said. She used something older than standard casting, Harry said. Older than most of our documented tradition. What she did that night wasn't in any book I've found. It was, instinctive. Or perhaps trained in ways we don't have records of. Dumbledore was quiet. Do you know what she used? Harry asked. Another pause. Longer. I have theories, Dumbledore said. Not certainties. Lily was exceptional in ways that resisted categorization. Rather like someone else I know. Harry absorbed this without the emotion it might have called up in a different person. Filed it. I'd like to read your theories. When you're older, I'll have the same questions when I'm older, Harry said. I'd rather have the information now and grow into the implications than have the implications delivered when the information's no longer new. Dumbledore glanced at him with the expression he'd worn throughout the year, the recalibration, the genuine surprise that had never fully resolved into comfort, the quality of a man encountering an argument he couldn't counter. I'll write them up properly, Dumbledore said. And send them to you over the summer. Thank you, Harry said. They reached the greenhouses, stopped. Dumbledore looked at him. You know there are more things coming, he said. Yes. Voldemort will find another way, Harry said. He has contingencies. I've been reading your published work on soul magic, which is remarkably candid about the theoretical possibilities, and if he's done what the theory suggests, Harry, Dumbledore said, quietly but with weight. Harry stopped. What do you know? Dumbledore said. That the number 7 has significance in dark magic, Harry said. That a soul can be divided if the practitioner has committed certain kinds of irrevocable acts. That each piece would function as an anchor. He met Dumbledore's eyes. That a man who feared death above everything else, who had spent decades pursuing immortality at any cost, would not have rested with a single contingency. The morning was very still. Dumbledore looked at Harry with an expression that was, for the first time in Harry's experience of him, simply open. The calculation gone. Just a man looking at a child who had worked out something that Dumbledore had been carrying alone for a very long time and deciding what to do with the specific relief of no longer being alone with it. How long have you known? Dumbledore said. Suspected since February, Harry said. The soul magic theory clicked in April. I spent May confirming the logic. He tilted his head. How many? Dumbledore was quiet for so long that the question seemed to disappear into the morning. 7 was the goal, he said, finally. I believe he achieved fewer. The diary, there will be a diary, I think. There may be others. Then we find them, Harry said. Systematically. Before he finds another way back that's more stable than what he had last night. We, Dumbledore said. Yes, Harry said. We. I'm not interested in being given information on a need-to-know basis. I'm not interested in being managed. I'm interested in solving the problem. He held Dumbledore's gaze. If you want someone who will do what they're told and not ask uncomfortable questions, I'm not that. But if you want someone who can do things that nobody else in this tradition can do and who isn't going to break under pressure, I'm available. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Your terms, he said. Full information, Harry said. Genuine counsel, not just being informed of decisions after they're made. And Zatanna is included in anything I'm included in. She's not peripheral to this. Zatanna Zatara, Dumbledore said, with the specific quality of someone evaluating a piece they'd previously classified as outside the game. Is the most capable magical practitioner I know, Harry said, and she's been ahead of this situation since she pulled me out of a cupboard. Working with her rather than around her would be a significant upgrade to whatever you're currently doing. A beat. She's also likely to hex me if I try to manage her, Dumbledore said. Probably, Harry agreed. She'd be very polite about it, though. Something happened in Dumbledore's face that, despite everything, was a genuine smile. Very well, he said. Full information. Genuine counsel. He looked at the greenhouses and then back. It will take some adjustment on my part. I know, Harry said. I appreciate the honesty. Harry, Dumbledore said, as Harry turned to head back toward the castle. He turned. I am, genuinely sorry, Dumbledore said. For the early years. For the choices I made. They seemed the only path at the time. Harry looked at him. The morning had gone full bright now, the dew starting to lift from the grass, the castle behind him gold in the early summer light. I know, Harry said. I believe you. A pause. It doesn't erase the cupboard. But it also doesn't have to be the whole story. He walked back to the castle. He didn't look back, but he heard Dumbledore stand there for a moment before the quiet sound of footsteps heading toward the greenhouse door. The Hogwarts Express going south was louder and warmer and different in every way from the train going north in September. Same route, reversed. The landscape going from highlands to lowland, from the specific scale of Scotland to the gradual thickening of England, the sky changing quality as they went. Harry's compartment was full. Ron had his feet on the seat. This had been happening since November and Harry had stopped mentioning it, eating the last of his compartment provisions with the thoroughness of someone who had 6 brothers and had learned early that food left unguarded was food lost. Hermione had 3 books open, which was her version of compartment leisure. Neville was looking out the window with the settled expression he'd been wearing since May and feeding Trevor with the focused care he gave all living things. And Ginny Weasley, Ron's younger sister, brought in by Ron with the specific awkward casualness of someone who didn't want to admit they were being a good brother, was across from Harry telling him about the time she'd accidentally enchanted all the garden gnomes at the burrow to speak in rhyme, which had lasted 3 weeks and had driven their mother to the edge of genuine hexing. Harry listened and contributed and ate a chocolate frog and thought about how this compartment, loud, warm, slightly chaotic, full of people he'd met 6 months ago and couldn't currently imagine not knowing, was something he'd had no category for in September. He'd had Zatanna. He'd had Constantine's occasional, acerbic presence. He'd had training and theory and the specific closeness of a 2-person household that was very good but very small. He hadn't had this. He hadn't known to want it, which was the specific thing about not having had something. You couldn't miss the exact shape of what it was until you were inside it. Oi, Ron said, cutting across something Ginny was saying. Harry. You've gone somewhere. Just thinking, Harry said. About what? How much happened in 9 months, Harry said. Ron considered this with the philosophical depth he occasionally brought to things when he wasn't thinking about chess or food. Loads, he said. More than most people's whole school time, probably. It's because of him, Hermione said, without looking up from her books. I'm right here, Harry said. I'm aware, she said. Things happen around you because you're the kind of person things happen around. That's not a criticism. It's accurate, Neville said. Completely accurate, Ginny confirmed. Harry looked around the compartment at the 4 of them delivering this assessment with the comfortable certainty of people who had decided it was simply true and didn't require debate. I don't think that's how it works, he said. It really is, Ron said. A mountain troll, a dark lord on someone's head, the Philosopher's Stone, 2 of the biggest Quidditch wins in Gryffindor in a decade, all of that happened because you exist. The mountain troll happened because someone let it in, Harry said. The Philosopher's Stone was already there before I arrived. But nothing would have been done about either without you, Hermione said. Dumbledore was managing, she said, in exactly the tone Harry had used when he'd said it to Zatanna. She looked up from her books and met his eyes, and he saw in her expression that she remembered him saying it and was using it deliberately. You've said it yourself. He looked at her. We're your people, she said simply. That's all. Accept it and move on. Ron made a noise of agreement. Neville did the same. Ginny was grinning. Harry looked at each of them in turn. All right, he said. Good, said Hermione, and returned to her books. The train went south. King's Cross arrived in the late afternoon, and the platform materialized around them with the specific transition of the barrier, magical community to Muggle world, and all the things that implied, and Harry stepped out of the train into the noise and the smell of a major London terminus and felt, as he always did when he came back to London from anywhere, the specific sensation of a city that was his. The crowd was the usual mixture, Muggle families meeting Muggle travelers, and threaded through them the other kind, managing trunks and owls with practiced discreetness. Reunion sounds everywhere. Children dropped on parents. Parents grabbing children. The specific noise of people relieved. He'd barely gotten through the barrier when he saw her. Zatanna was standing near the main concourse, not performing any version of unobtrusive. She was, as she'd always been, simply herself, which drew the eye regardless of intent, because the specific quality of her presence was one of those things that couldn't be completely turned down. She was in her non-performance clothes, the dark trousers, the white shirt, the sleeves rolled, and she had her hands in her pockets and she was watching the barrier for him, and when she saw him her expression did the thing it always did, the thing that had happened every time he'd come into a room for 7 years, the thing that he suspected she didn't know was as visible as it was. She looked at him like he was the most significant thing in the room. He walked toward her through the crowd and she met him halfway and looked at him, the checking over, the rapid assessment, the confirmation of whole, unharmed, here, and then she did the thing she'd done since he was small, hand on the back of his neck, brief and real, the gesture that said everything it had always said. Good year, she said. Extraordinary year, he said. I know, she said. I heard most of it. She glanced past him at Ron, who was being absorbed into the Weasley family reunion with the specific chaos of several people all talking at once. At Hermione, who was being embraced by 2 Muggle parents with the warmth of people who had sent their daughter into an unknown world and were very glad to have her back. At Neville, who was being collected by a severe-looking woman who softened visibly when she saw him. Come meet them properly, Harry said. She let him take her toward the group, and he introduced her, to Ron first, who shook her hand with the slightly odd quality of someone meeting someone significant and doing well not to show it, and then to the entire Weasley family, which was an event rather than an introduction, Molly Weasley immediately absorbing Zatanna into a conversation that appeared to be about school nutrition and showed no signs of ending, Arthur Weasley asking her 2 technical questions about magical concealment. With the enthusiasm of a man who found other magical traditions as exciting as Muggle objects. Harry stood back and watched this happen and felt, very clearly, the satisfaction of two parts of his world meeting in the ordinary way, not dramatically, not symbolically, just people in a train station being people. Hermione appeared at his elbow. "She's lovely," Hermione said. "I can see where you get the directness." "She taught me most things," Harry said. "Is she coming to meet my parents?" "I didn't know there was a plan for that." "There is now," Hermione said. "My parents are going to want to understand what they've sent me into, and she can explain it better than anyone." She paused. "Unless you think she'd find that, she'll be glad to," he said. "She likes people who ask genuine questions." "Good," Hermione said. "Because my mother has a list." He laughed. "Of course she does." Constantine was leaning against a pillar near the main concourse exit, smoking in the specifically non-compliant way he smoked in non-smoking places, a cup of terrible coffee in his other hand, watching the reunion unfold with the expression of a man who was here under duress and was privately more invested than the expression conveyed. Harry walked up beside him. "You came," Harry said. "She made me," Constantine said. "She asked," Harry said. "You came." "Different thing." Constantine took a drag. Looked at Harry with the specific look he used when he was evaluating something and pretending to be more casual about it than he was. "You're all right," he said. It was a question formatted as a statement. "Yes," Harry said. "The Voldemort business, handled for now," Harry said. "Not permanently." "I know," Constantine said. "I've been looking into some of the soul work. The older dark tradition stuff." He tapped Ash. "There are things hidden. Not many people know where." "I know," Harry said. Constantine looked at him sharply. "I had a conversation with Dumbledore this morning," Harry said. "He has theories. We're going to compare notes over the summer." "You brought Dumbledore into the fold," Constantine said. "More or less." Constantine was quiet for a moment. "And he agreed?" "He didn't really have a choice," Harry said, pleasantly. "I gave him terms." Constantine stared at him. "He's brilliant and he's genuinely committed to the right outcome," Harry said. "He just has a habit of managing the pieces rather than involving them. I'd rather be involved." "You gave Albus Dumbledore terms," Constantine said, slowly, like the syllables required extra care. "Politely," Harry said. Another stare. "You know," Constantine said, finally, "when Zatanna called me from Surrey 6 years ago and told me she'd picked up a 4-year-old from a cupboard, she didn't call you from Surrey," Harry said. "She told me she called you the next morning." "Semantics," Constantine said. "The point is, I told her she'd lost her mind. Taking in a child, a wizarding child, a prophecy child," he shook his head. "I thought it was going to be a disaster." "Was it?" Harry said. Constantine looked at him for a long moment. "No," he said. "It really wasn't." He took one last drag of the cigarette and dropped it, ground it out with his shoe. "Don't tell her I said that," he said. "She'll be insufferable." "I will absolutely tell her," Harry said. "Figured," Constantine said, and they walked back toward the group. The townhouse in Marylebone was exactly as it always was, the same bookshelves, the same botanical specimens, the same luminescent quality of magic in the walls, and it received Harry the way it had for 7 years, which was to say immediately and without ceremony, the specific welcome of a place that knew you. He left his trunk in his room, put his wand holster on the desk, sat on his bed for a moment and looked at the ceiling. The photograph was on his desk, the same one from the carrier bag, his mother, young and laughing, holding an infant that was him. He'd looked at it so many times over the years that he'd stopped having to adjust to it, it had just become part of the furniture of his room, part of the permanent record of who he was and where he'd come from. He picked it up now and looked at it properly. She had his eyes. He'd been told that many times, the specific green of them, the shade that was apparently distinctive enough to be notable. She looked like someone who laughed easily, who meant what she said, who had loved enormously and chosen to die for it without hesitation. He set the photograph back down carefully. He went downstairs. They ate late, because it was summer and the light lasted and there was no particular reason to rush, something from the garden that Zatanna grew in the specific way she grew things, with the light hands of someone who understood that growing things responded to patience, and a bottle of something that she'd had since a visit to the Zatara estate that John had once described as aggressively civilized. They ate. They talked. The conversation moved the way good conversations did, non-linearly, through several subjects, occasionally doubling back, never bored. Harry told her about the exam results he was confident in, and which he thought might have gone less cleanly, and she had specific observations about each because she'd been doing remote magical sensing on his performance without telling him, which he knew but they'd agreed to the polite fiction of not discussing. She told him about the job in Rome that had come up during the year, a consultation on an artifact that had turned out to be considerably more than an artifact, which had involved 2 days of intensive backward speech working and one near disaster involving a portal that shouldn't have been where it was. "You should have called me," he said. "You had exams," she said. "Zatanna, it was fine," she said. "It resolved." He looked at her with the expression he wore when he was filing a thing for later. "I'm going to start doing more fieldwork this summer," she said. "I've been in London most of the year. There are things that need attention that I've been managing from a distance." She looked at him. "I'd like you to come on some of them." "Yes," he said, immediately. "Not all of them," she said. "Some are, not appropriate levels of risk for 12-year-old fieldwork. I handled Voldemort. In a controlled environment," she said. "With a known set of conditions. Fieldwork is different. You'll come on the appropriate ones and I'll assess as we go." He looked at her. "Fair," he said. She raised her glass slightly. He raised his water. They ate. "There's a thing I want to say," she said, after a while. "Then say it." She looked at her glass. Then at him. The evening light in the kitchen was the specific warmth of a summer night coming down, the garden visible through the open back door. "I've been thinking about last year," she said. "What it meant. Not the Voldemort piece, the rest of it. The school, the friends, the things you," she paused, looking for the word, "grew into." "It was good," he said. "The year. Despite everything. It was good." "I know," she said. "I could tell from the letters." She turned her glass. "When you came to me, when I took you from that house, you were 4 and you'd already learned to be very small. Very contained. You used to eat like you were afraid the food would disappear." He knew this. He had the odd patchy memory of very early childhood, mostly impressions rather than events, the specific texture of the cupboard, the quality of the Dursleys' avoidance, the way he'd existed in the margins of a life that hadn't wanted him. "I know," he said. "And now you're," she made a gesture that encompassed the room, the year, him, this. "Which is who you always were. I just want to say that." She looked at him directly. "Whatever the year cost, whatever the next years will cost, you have always been exactly who you're supposed to be. Not the boy who lived. Not the chosen one. Just you. That's always been enough. More than enough." He was quiet for a moment. "I know," he said, finally. "I know you know," she said. "I'm saying it anyway." He looked at her. This woman who had walked into a cupboard in the rain and said "I'll take that," who had taught him everything she knew and then made space for him to become things she hadn't known, who had raised him not to be the person the prophecy wanted but to be a person period, fully, without apology. "I know who I am," he said. "Because of you." She looked at him. "I know what I can do," he said. "Because of you." "You'd have figured it out, maybe," he said. Or maybe I'd have gotten to Hogwarts at 11 and been a lost boy looking for belonging and done whatever I was told because I needed people to need me. He held her gaze. I'm not that. I never needed to be that. Because you made sure I already knew. She was quiet. So thank you, he said. For the cupboard. And the table you let me set on fire. And the books. And the garden training. And for telling me about my parents when I asked. He paused. And for being scared for me instead of making me be scared for myself. The kitchen was very quiet. Zatanna put her glass down and looked at the garden through the open door for a moment. You know, I'm not actually very good at this, she said. The parenting thing. Most days I'm making it up. You're brilliant at it, he said. I burnt your birthday cake the first time I made one. You literally made a new cake appear using backward speech while singing happy birthday in 3-part harmony with yourself, he said. The original cake was irrelevant, he said. The second cake was excellent. She laughed, and he did too, and the evening went easy around them. Later, when the dishes were done and the kitchen quiet and the garden going dark, Harry climbed to the roof. The Marylebone townhouse had a flat section at the top, accessible through a hatch in the 4th-floor landing, wide enough for 2 people to sit comfortably and look at the city. He'd been coming up here since he was small, when he needed to think, when the house felt busy, when the sky felt like the right companion. He heard the hatch open behind him. Zatanna climbed up and sat beside him, bringing 2 cups of tea. He took his. London was doing what London did at 10 o'clock on a summer night, all lit up and complicated, the specific vast ordinariness of a city that contained everything, that had been there longer than anyone and would be there longer still, impervious and alive. The diary, Harry said, after a while. She said. Dumbledore thinks it'll be at the school. Next year. I think so too, she said. The soul fragment would want to return to the place associated with what it is. I'll need to be ready for a different kind of possession, he said. Not a direct host like Quirrell. Something more insidious. More patient. The diary would work through someone else, she said. Possibly someone young. Susceptible. Which means I need to watch my friends, he said. Not in a paranoid way. Just, with attention. She nodded. I've also been thinking about the harmonic, he said. What it felt like when it hit the spirit entity. There was a specific frequency, a resonance point where both systems were operating and the combined working was more effective than either alone. I want to spend the summer mapping that frequency more precisely. Yes, she said. And the animagus theory that Hermione mentioned in passing in May, one thing at a time, she said. I can do more than one thing at a time. I know, she said. I'm saying pace yourself over the summer. You've been running at full speed for 9 months. I don't get tired, he said. You get tired, she said. You just don't always notice until you stop. He thought about this. Fair, he said. They drank their tea. The city moved below them, its 10,000 things at once rhythm that never fully stopped. Constantine says the soul magic tradition, the specific dark working that produces a Horcrux, requires several very specific conditions, Harry said. Including one that makes the objects themselves recognizable to someone sufficiently sensitive. She glanced at him. He's been researching, Harry said. He didn't tell me directly, but he left his notes on the kitchen table twice, which I think means he wanted me to read them. That's exactly what it means, she said. He'll deny it. I know. Harry turned his cup in his hands. The diary is probably a test. If Voldemort left it to surface at the school, he expects it to do something that advances his return. He's not recovered enough for a direct attempt. What happened with Quirrell was an extreme measure, not a plan working correctly. The diary is a slower tool. He underestimates how quickly you learn, she said. He's never encountered someone like me, Harry said. He's built his understanding of wizarding power over decades, and everything he knows about magic is from one tradition. He has no framework for, he gestured between them, this. He'll try to build one, she said. After Quirrell. He'll have felt the harmonic. He'll be studying it. Good, Harry said. Let him try. Whatever he figures out about it, I can do more with it than he can theorize about. She looked at him with an expression that was, underneath the professional assessment, simply maternal. You're 12 in a month, she said. Yes. You're talking about an ongoing war with one of the most powerful dark wizards in the last century. Yes. And you're not afraid, she said. Not of him, he said. I've told you. I know what his fear feels like. He's afraid of me too. What are you afraid of? She asked. Genuine question, not strategic. He thought about it. Actually thought, the real consideration, the honest look inward. Losing people, he said. You. Ron. Hermione. Neville. He paused. Not because I can't stand alone, I can. But because the point of being able to stand isn't to stand alone. It's to protect the things worth protecting. She was very still. If I lose someone because I wasn't enough, he said, or wasn't fast enough, or wasn't, that's the thing I'm afraid of. That's not a weakness, she said. That's, I know, he said. It's what makes the work worth doing. I know. He looked at the city. It still scares me. Good, she said. Hold on to that. Don't let the power make you think you're immune from consequence. You're not. I know. And Harry, she waited until he looked at her, if anything happens to you, I will take apart every dimension of magical reality until I find what did it. You've said that before, he said. I mean it more each time, she said. He smiled. The full one. I know, he said. That's why nothing's going to happen to me. I have excellent motivation. She laughed softly and looked back at the city. They sat there, the two of them, on the roof of their house in Marylebone, with London spread out below them, ordinary and extraordinary simultaneously, the way the best things always were, and the summer night around them and the year behind them and everything that was coming still arranged in the future tense, not happened yet, not solid yet, still in the state of possibility. The harmonic was there, low and constant, the way it always was in him now, the two systems settled into their coexistence, the third thing they made together present like a pulse, like a tone too deep to hear but felt entirely. He was 12 in a month. He was the boy who lived, the chosen one, the centerpiece of a prophecy written before his birth. He was also Harry, exactly and specifically Harry, raised on Giovanni's journals and backward speech and rooftop conversations and a kitchen table that had been replaced twice and a woman who had walked into a cupboard in the rain because she felt him across 14 miles and decided that was enough of a reason. He was both of those things and neither of those things was the whole story. The whole story was still being written. Below, London went on. Above, the summer sky, London sky, amber grey and familiar, not full dark because the city never let it get fully dark, showed its few visible stars. Harry drank his tea. He thought about September. He thought about Hermione's revision schedule and Ron's chess and Neville in the greenhouses and the specific warmth of a school that had surprised him by becoming somewhere he belonged. He thought about a diary somewhere, waiting. He thought about Voldemort, scattered, diminished, furious, patient, and the specific quality of its fear when the harmonic had hit it, and the fact that it was now rebuilding its understanding of what it faced. Let it rebuild. He'd be ready. He was always going to be ready. Summer plans? Zatanna said. Fieldwork, he said. The harmonic mapping. That book on animagus theory I'm going to read whether you sanction it or not. 2 letters per week to Hermione, she'll write daily, that's her nature, and I don't want to be rude. That's generous of you, she said, dryly. Rome, he said. She glanced at him. You said you had fieldwork in Rome, he said. I want to come. The appropriate ones, she said. Rome is appropriate, he said. I speak Italian. Since when? Since I was 9, he said. Giovanni's journals are in 3 languages. She stared at him. I should have known that, she said. Yes, he agreed. She shook her head slowly. Rome, she said. Fine. Rome. He smiled. Looked back at the city. Something in the air shifted, not threatening, not significant, just the specific quality of the night moving on, the hour getting late, the summer long and full ahead. Thank you, Harry said. For all of it. Not just the year. All of it. She looked at him. Always, she said. The word meant everything it was supposed to mean. It always had. They sat on the roof until the tea was cold and the city had moved into its 2 a.m. register, quieter but never quiet, alive in the specific way it was alive when the performing was done and only the genuine remained. Eventually they went inside. The house settled around them, the bookshelves, the botanical specimens, the magical warmth of walls that had absorbed years of living and held them, and Harry went to bed and lay in the dark and thought about everything, the whole year, the whole shape of it, and then he stopped thinking about everything and just felt it. Grateful. Ready. Completely, entirely, unafraid. The harmonic hummed low in the quiet. The summer waited. And somewhere out there, in the vast architecture of what was coming, the diary, the basilisk, the tournament, the graveyard, all the things still arranged in the future tense, not yet, not solid, still possibilities, fate was trying to find its shape. It hadn't accounted for this. For him. For what a child raised in a cupboard could become when someone picked him up and said no, not this, something better. It was going to have to adjust. He closed his eyes. He slept.